Tonight, we break the oldest rule the Dragon Lords ever made. One rider, one dragon. That was the law. Not written, not debated, simply understood, the way the law of gravity was understood. A man could bond with one dragon. One mind could hold one fire. The connection between rider and beast was singular, exclusive, the union of two consciousnesses that left no room for a third. One rider, one dragon. For 3,000 years, since the first Dragon Lord climbed onto the first dragon in the smoking hills above Valyria, the rule had held. Nobody had broken it. Nobody had tried, because trying would have meant holding three fires in one mind, and the mind that attempted it would have burned. What if Jon Snow broke the rule? Not because he wanted to. Jon Snow never wanted power, never reached for it, never stood in front of a mirror and imagined himself on a throne with three dragons at his back. He broke the rule because the dragons chose him, because his blood, the blood of the ice and the fire, the Stark and the Targaryen, the wolf and the dragon, called to all three, and all three answered. And the answering was the thing that no Targaryen in 3,000 years had experienced, and that Jon Snow was about to experience without preparation, without training, and without the slightest understanding of what three dragon minds pressing on one human mind would do to the mind that held them. This is not a story about power. Power was the easy part. This is a story about weight. The weight of three ancient fires carried by one man who wanted nothing more than to go home, and who discovered that home was the one place three dragons would not let him reach. Winter fell, the day the sky darkened. They came from the south on a morning when the northern sky was the color of iron. Three shadows, moving across the clouds like storms with wings, the shapes too large to be birds, and too fast to be clouds, and too impossible to be what every person in Winterfell's courtyard knew they were. The shadows passed over the castle, and the shadows darkened the yard, and the shadows produced a sound, not a roar, but a vibration, the deep bass thrum of wings the size of ship sails, beating the air into submission. Dragons. Three dragons. The last three dragons in the world, the children of Daenerys Targaryen, the weapons that had conquered Slaver's Bay, and that were now, for the first time since the doom of Valyria, flying over the north. Winterfell stopped. The castle, the whole castle, every person, every horse, every dog, stopped and looked up. The stopping was involuntary, the animal response to the presence of apex predators, the freeze that every creature performed when the thing above it was too large and too fast and too deadly to respond to in any other way. Jon was in the yard when they came. He was with Ghost, the white direwolf pressed against his leg, the red eyes watching the sky with the flat, assessing stare of a predator evaluating a predator. Ghost did not freeze. Ghost growled, the low, sustained growl that was Ghost's response to things that were wrong, things that did not belong, things that threatened the man the wolf belonged to. Jon looked up. The largest dragon, Drogon, the black one, Daenerys's mount, passed directly over the courtyard. The shadow covered Winterfell completely for 3 heartbeats, the darkness falling like a curtain, the world going black-green as the creature's body blocked the iron sky. Jon felt something. Not fear, though the fear was there, underneath. The mammalian terror that every human experienced in the presence of something that could destroy them. Something else. A pulling. A tug. Deep in his chest. Below the ribs. In the place where the blood lived. The pulling was toward the sky. Toward the shadows. toward the three creatures that were circling Winterfell with the slow, territorial assessment of predators claiming new ground. The pulling was his blood. The Targaryen blood. The fire in the ice. The inheritance that Jon had learned about and accepted, and that he had thought was merely a fact, a piece of information, a detail of his ancestry, a thing he carried without consequence. The pulling said, not without consequence. The pulling said, the blood is not a fact. The blood is a connection. And the connection is live. Jon put his hand on Ghost's head. The wolf's fur was cold. The wolf's body was solid. The wolf was the north. The ice. The real. The thing Jon knew. The pulling continued. Jon watched the three shapes in the sky and felt each one separately through the blood. The first was Drogon, the largest, the blackest, the shadow that covered the most ground. Drogon's presence in Jon's blood was heat and hostility, the awareness of a creature that was bonded to another rider and that viewed Jon's blood call as an intrusion. Drogon was Daenerys's. The feeling from Drogon was territorial. Stay away. The second was Rhaegal, the Green, the middle child, named for a prince who had been Jon's father, though Jon had never met him, and the dragon had never known him. Rhaegal's presence was different from Drogon's. Where Drogon projected hostility, Rhaegal projected curiosity, the blood recognizing the blood, the fire asking a question that the fire in Jon's veins was trying to answer. The third was Viserion, the gold, the smallest, the one whose presence in Jon's blood was the most confusing. Viserion's signal was static, neither hostile nor curious, but oscillating, the consciousness of a creature that could not decide what the blood call meant, and that was producing, in Jon's awareness, the psychic equivalent of a buzzing frequency that could not find its station. 3 dragons, 3 presences. 3 fires calling to one man's blood, and the calling was happening before the dragons had even landed, before Jon had seen them up close, before anyone in Winterfell had processed the impossible reality that the age of dragons had returned to the north. Ghost pressed harder against Jon's leg. The direwolf felt the calling too, not the dragon bond, but the wolf bond. Ghost's awareness that something was pulling at the man the wolf belonged to. Something that was fire where the wolf was ice. Something that the wolf could not fight, and could not understand, and could only endure. "I know, boy," Jon said. To the wolf. To himself. "I know." The dragons landed. They landed outside Winterfell's walls, in the field to the south, the open ground that the Northern Army used for training, and that was now, in a matter of seconds, converted from a military exercise field to a dragon roost. The landing shook the ground. 3 impacts, 3 earthquakes, the weight of 3 creatures descending on the northern earth with the force of siege engines. Then Daenerys came. She rode through Winterfell's gates on a silver horse with an army behind her, the Unsullied, the Dothraki, the combined military force that had crossed the narrow sea at her command. She rode with the bearing of a queen, silver-haired, violet-eyed, the last Targaryen, as far as she knew, the mother of dragons, the breaker of chains, the woman who had walked into fire and walked out with 3 living gods on her shoulders. She rode to the courtyard. She dismounted. She looked at Jon. "King Snow," she said. "Queen Daenerys. I've come to discuss an alliance." The violet eyes, assessing, sharp. The eyes of a woman who had conquered half a continent and who was now standing in a northern castle, evaluating the man she needed as an ally and who she would, she expected, find to be another northern lord with northern honor and northern stubbornness and no understanding of the world beyond his walls. She did not expect what she found. She found a man whose blood was singing. She could not hear it. The singing was internal. The Targaryen blood in Jon's veins, responding to the proximity of dragons, the fire calling to fire across the gap between the yard and the field. But Daenerys could see the effect. The man's eyes, grey, stark eyes, northern eyes, were tracking the sky where her dragons were circling. The tracking was not the frightened tracking of a man watching a threat. It was the focused tracking of a man following something he was connected to. "Your dragons," Jon said. "My children. They're—" He stopped. The pulling in his chest was stronger now. The three presences, Drogon, Rhaegal, Viserion, pressing on his consciousness through the blood, the three fires burning at the edge of his awareness, each one distinct, each one calling. "They're magnificent," Jon said. "They're mine," Daenerys said. The possessive was not casual. The possessive was a wall, the Queen's assertion of ownership, the line drawn before the conversation had properly begun. The dragons were hers. The dragons were not for sharing, not for admiring, not for touching. Jon heard the possessive. He did not argue. He did not mention the pulling, the calling, the blood that was reaching toward the sky. He nodded. "Welcome to Winterfell, Your Grace." "Thank you, King Snow." The alliance began. Sansa watched from the Great Hall's window. The eldest Stark daughter, the woman who had survived King's Landing and the Boltons and the political education that suffering provided. Sansa watched the Dragon Queen dismount in the courtyard and assessed with the cold intelligence that the South had beaten into her. "She's dangerous," Sansa said, to nobody, to herself, to the glass. Arya was beside her. The younger sister, the fighter, the wolf girl who had crossed the narrow sea and returned with skills that the family did not discuss and that the family was glad she possessed. "The dragons are dangerous," Arya said. "She's just the woman who rides them. The woman who rides them is the danger. A woman with 3 dragons and an army doesn't come to Winterfell to ask for alliance. She comes to demand submission." "Jon won't submit. Jon might not have a choice." Arya looked at her sister. The Stark assessment, not the political assessment that Sansa had learned in the South, but the personal assessment that Arya had learned everywhere else. "Jon always has a choice. Jon is the most stubborn person we know, including father. Stubbornness doesn't stop dragonfire. No, but it slows down queens." They watched. The 2 Stark sisters, Ice and Ice, the northern women who had survived what the South had thrown at them and who were now watching the South arrive at their door with 3 dragons and the expectation of compliance. The expectation was going to be disappointed. But the disappointment was going to take a while. Later that evening, Arya went to the field where the dragons rested. Not close. Even Arya, who feared very little, maintained a respectful distance from 3 creatures that could incinerate the castle she lived in. But close enough to see. Close enough to watch the dragons in the torchlight, the massive forms curled in the field. The eyes, 3 pairs, each a different shade of gold, catching the firelight and reflecting it back with the internal luminescence that was the dragon's signature. "They're beautiful," Arya said. To Jon, who was in the field too, who had been drawn to the field the way iron was drawn to a lodestone, the blood pull that he could not resist and that he was not yet ready to explain. "They're terrifying." Beautiful and terrifying are the same word for different people. "That's the most Arya thing you've ever said." "I've been saving it." She looked at the dragons, at Jon, at the way Jon looked at the dragons, the focused intensity that was not fear and not admiration but connection, the look of a man seeing something that was part of him that he had not known was missing. "You feel something from them." "Arya, don't lie. You feel something. Your face does a thing when you look at them. The same thing Ghost's face does when Ghost looks at you. The recognition thing." Jon held this. His sister, his cousin, the girl who had never been fooled by anything and who was not going to be fooled now. "I feel something," Jon said. "Is it the Targaryen blood?" "Probably." "Does the Queen know?" "Not yet. She'll notice." Queens notice everything, especially queens who are possessive about their dragons. You've been here 2 hours and you've already assessed the queen. I assessed the queen in the courtyard. It took 4 seconds. She's brilliant. She's fierce. And she's going to hate you when she finds out why the dragons like you. That's encouraging. It's accurate. Accurate and encouraging are different things. Arya looked at the dragons one more time. Be careful, Jon. Beautiful and terrifying, remember. I remember. Good. She left. Jon stayed, in the field, with the dragons and the wolf and the blood that was pulling him toward the sky. The trouble began at the same time. Rhaegal, the first to choose. Rhaegal came to Jon on the 3rd night. The green dragon, named for Rhaegar, named for Jon's father. A coincidence that was not a coincidence because the universe was not subtle, separated from the other two, and flew to the field below Winterfell's walls, where Jon walked with Ghost in the evenings. The nightly patrol that was Jon's habit and Jon's solitude. Jon heard the wings first. The sound, the deep, rhythmic beating that displaced the air and produced the bass vibration that was becoming familiar. He looked up. The green shape descending through the dark, the jade scales catching the starlight, the creature landing in the field 50 yards from where Jon stood. Ghost bristled. The direwolf did not growl. The growl was for threats. This was something else. The wolf's awareness of a presence that was not threatening but was competing. The predator's recognition of another predator that occupied the same ecological niche. Ghost and the dragon were both bonded to Jon. Ghost had been bonded for years. The dragon was attempting something new. Rhaegal looked at Jon. The eyes were gold green, the color shifting in the starlight. The eyes held intelligence, not the human kind, not the reasoned, linguistic intelligence that maesters studied. The older kind, the kind that existed before language, before civilization, before the first man built the first wall. The intelligence of a creature that had been old when Valyria was young, and that was looking at a man and seeing something. The pulling in Jon's chest intensified. The blood call, the fire reaching for the fire. The connection that had been humming since the dragons arrived, and that was now, with Rhaegal 30 yards away. Not humming, but singing. Jon walked toward the dragon. Don't, a voice said. Behind him, Daenerys. She had followed him. Or she had been watching the dragons and had seen Rhaegal separate, and had followed the green shape to the field where Jon was walking. And the following was not coincidence, but the protective instinct of a mother watching one of her children approach a stranger. Don't approach him, Daenerys said. Rhaegal is. He's the most sensitive. He reacts badly to strangers. He's not reacting badly. Daenerys stopped. She looked at the dragon. Rhaegal was not aggressive. Rhaegal was not defensive. Rhaegal was calm. The jade-scaled creature sitting in the northern field with the same patient stillness that Ghost adopted when Ghost was waiting for Jon to finish something. The stillness of a creature that was not preparing for violence but preparing for contact. He's waiting for you, Daenerys said. Not a statement of approval, a statement of observation, the queen watching something she did not understand and that she was not sure she wanted to understand. Jon walked toward Rhaegal. The last 10 feet were the hardest. The dragon's head was the size of a horse, the jaws capable of biting through plate armor, the teeth visible in the starlight, the breath carrying heat that warmed the cold northern air. The last 10 feet were the gap between safe and not safe, the distance that separated a man from the most powerful predator in the world. Jon crossed the gap. He put his hand on Rhaegal's neck. The contact was the thing that changed everything. The dragon's consciousness hit Jon's mind with the force of a river breaking a dam. Not violent, overwhelming. The sheer volume of the dragon's presence, the ancient intelligence, the sensory experience of a creature that saw heat and felt wind and processed the world in dimensions that human perception could not access. The consciousness poured through the bond, the blood connection, the Targaryen channel, and into Jon's mind, and Jon's mind staggered under the weight. He did not fall. He held. He held because the holding was the Stark in him, the stubbornness, the northern refusal to go down, the quality that had kept Starks standing through 8,000 winters. He held, and the dragon's consciousness found its place beside the wolf's consciousness, Ghost's bond, which had been the only animal presence in Jon's mind for years, and which was now joined by something larger and hotter and infinitely more complex. Two bonds, the wolf and the dragon, the ice and the fire. Jon stood with his hand on Rhaegal's neck and felt the dual presence, Ghost at his back, pressed against his leg, the wolf's cold consciousness anchoring him while the dragon's hot consciousness expanded him. And he knew without anyone telling him that this was not the end. This was the beginning. Rhaegal was the first, not the last. The thought terrified him. Daenerys watched from 30 yards away. Her face, illuminated by the distant torchlight from Winterfell's walls, showed something Jon could not read from this distance, but that he would later learn to recognize. The first crack. The first fissure in the Queen's certainty. The first sign that the world she had built, the world where she was the mother of dragons, the only dragonrider, the singular connection between the dragons and the human race, was about to be shared. Shared was not a word Daenerys used. Shared implied equality, and equality with her dragons was the one thing Daenerys had never been asked to provide. "He likes you," Daenerys said. The words were neutral. The voice was not. I think he knows me," Jon said. "Through the blood." "The blood. Targaryen blood." Jon looked at her. The violet eyes, the silver hair, the queen who was his aunt and who did not yet know it. "I should tell you something. Tell me." "Not here. Not." He looked at the dragon, at Ghost, at the two creatures that were now both bonded to him and that were, he could feel through the connections, aware of each other and uncertain about each other, and held in a balance that was fragile. "Tomorrow. I'll tell you tomorrow. When there's..." He did not say, "When I've had time to figure out how to tell you that you're not the last Targaryen." "Tomorrow," Daenerys said. She turned. She walked back toward Winterfell. Rhaegal watched her go, the green eyes tracking the silver-haired woman, the dragon's loyalty divided for the first time since hatching. The dragon loved Daenerys. The dragon was choosing Jon. The two things coexisted, and the coexisting was the tension that would, in the weeks to come, crack the world open. Jon stood in the field with his hand on the dragon's neck and his wolf at his back, and the knowledge that tomorrow he would tell his aunt the truth. The truth was going to hurt. Everything about this was going to hurt. The days between. What the bond did to Jon. The days between Rhaegal's first contact and the War Council were the days Jon began to change. The change was not dramatic, not the overnight transformation that songs described, the man who touched a dragon and became a dragon lord, the instant metamorphosis from mortal to something more. The change was incremental, daily, the kind of change that you noticed in the mirror but that nobody else noticed, because the increments were too small for external observation. The first change was the heat. Jon ran hot. He had always been northern warm, the Stark blood producing the body heat that kept northerners alive through winters that killed southern men. But the Rhaegal bond intensified the heat. Jon's body temperature rose. Not dangerously, not fever, not illness. A degree, 2 degrees. the increase making the northern cold feel less cold, the winter air that had been bracing now feeling mild, the temperature change that said, "The fire is in you now." Maester Wolkan noticed. The maester at Winterfell, the man who had replaced Lewin and who had the clinical attention of a healer watching for symptoms, Wolkan took Jon's temperature and found it elevated and could not explain the elevation because the elevation had no medical cause. "You're running warm," Wolkan said. "Are you ill?" "I feel fine." "You feel fine, but your body temperature is 2 degrees above normal. In a healthy man with no symptoms of infection, an elevated temperature suggests..." "Suggests what?" Wolkan looked at Jon, at the king in the north who had a dragon sleeping in the field outside the castle. "Suggests that something unusual is happening to your physiology," Wolkan said. Diplomatically, the second change was the dreaming. Jon had always dreamed of wolves, the warg dreams, ghost's eyes, ghost's perception, the world seen through the wolf's senses. The wolf dreams were familiar, comfortable, the nighttime extension of the daytime bond that Jon had carried since the pups were found near Winterfell. Now the dreams included fire, not replacing the wolf dreams, alongside them. Jon dreamed of the sky, Rhaegal's sky, the green dragon's perception of the world from above, the thermal currents and the wind patterns and the vast, impossible perspective that only a creature with 100-foot wingspan could access. The sky dreams were vivid, immersive, the sleeping mind fully inside the dragon's experience. The dual dreaming was disorienting. Wolf dream and dragon dream overlapping. The cold of ghosts hunting mixed with the heat of Rhaegal's flying. The ground-level predator and the aerial predator, both present in Jon's sleeping mind. The two consciousnesses sharing the same space and producing a dream state that was neither wolf nor dragon, but a blend of both. Jon woke confused. Every morning, the half-heartbeat of uncertainty. Am I the wolf? Am I the dragon? Am I the man? The identity question that lasted a fraction of a second before the waking mind reasserted itself and answered, "I am Jon. I am the man. The wolf and the dragon are in me, but they are not me." The reassertion was exhausting. Not the half-heartbeat itself, the having to reassert, every morning, the identity that should have been automatic. The daily reaffirmation of self that the bonds required. The cognitive cost of maintaining Jonness in a mind that was hosting 2 other consciousnesses. The third change was the seeing. Jon began to see heat. Not literally, not the full thermal vision that the dragons possessed, the ability to see the world as a map of temperature, but the edges, the beginnings, the awareness of warm bodies in cold spaces, the detection of living things through walls and doors, the faint perception of thermal signatures that should have been invisible to human eyes. He noticed it in the Great Hall. During a council session, he could sense, not see, sense, the warmth of the people in the room. 30 warm bodies in a cold stone hall, each one a thermal presence that Jon's enhanced perception could detect. The awareness arriving not through his eyes but through the bond, the dragon's sensory input bleeding into the man's perception. Jon. Davos. Across the table. "You're staring at the wall." "I'm not staring at the wall." "You've been looking at the stone behind Lord Glover for 3 minutes. There's a rat in the wall, behind the stone. I can feel it. Feel a rat. Its warmth. The body heat. Through the stone." Davos looked at Jon. The look of a man who had served kings and smugglers, and who was now serving a king who could sense rats through castle walls. And the serving was entering territory that no smuggler's experience had prepared for. "The dragons," Davos said. Not a question. "The bond is sharing things. The dragon's perception is bleeding into mine. I'm starting to sense what Rhaegal senses. Is that normal?" Nothing about this is normal, Davos. Fair point. The changes accumulated. Heat, dreams, the thermal sense, the gold at the edges of Jon's eyes, the small daily erosions of the purely human that the dragon bond was producing, the man becoming more than a man and less than a man simultaneously. Jon held the changes. The way he held everything, inside, compressed, the stark habit that was his mother's blood and his uncle's teaching, and the only defense he had against a transformation he could not stop. He held because holding was what he did. He held because letting go was worse. The truth. What Jon told Daenerys. He told her in the Godswood because the Godswood was the one place in Winterfell where walls did not listen. She came alone. He came alone. The two Targaryens in the Godswood of the Starks, the heart tree watching with its red eyes, the weirwood face bearing witness to the conversation that would reshape the most powerful dynasty in the world's history. Your father was the Mad King, Jon said. Aerys Targaryen. I know who my father was. Your brother was Rhaegar. I know who my brother was. Rhaegar married my mother, Lyanna Stark, in a secret ceremony. The marriage was legitimate. I am their son. The Godswood was very still. Their son, Daenerys said. Rhaegar's son. Your nephew. My eye. She stopped. The stopping was the processing, the Targaryen mind, which was quick and fierce and accustomed to political complexity, working through the implications at the speed of a woman who had spent her life navigating impossible situations. You're telling me? I'm telling you that I am Aegon Targaryen, born at the Tower of Joy in Dawn, hidden by Ned Stark, who raised me as his bastard to protect me from Robert Baratheon. Aegon. That was the name my mother gave me. Aegon is a Targaryen name. I'm a Targaryen. You're a Stark. You look like a Stark. You talk like a Stark. You sit on a Stark throne in a Stark castle and you... The composure broke. Not dramatically. The crack, the fracture, the Queen's control splintering under the weight of a truth that she had not anticipated. If you're Rhaegar's son, I have a claim to the Iron Throne. Yes, I know. You have a better claim. Rhaegar was the heir. His son, you, outrank me. By Targaryen succession, I don't want the Iron Throne. What you want is irrelevant. What you are is... She stopped again. The violet eyes were bright. Not with tears, with calculation, the rapid assessment of a queen evaluating a threat that had just materialized inside an alliance she needed. This is why the dragons... Rhaegal. Yes, the blood. Rhaegal was named for your father. I know. Rhaegar's dragon, named for Rhaegar, choosing Rhaegar's son. Daenerys looked at the heart tree, at the face, at the old gods that were not her gods, and that were watching this conversation with the permanent attention of carved wood. You have proof. Bran, my brother, my cousin. He has the green sight. He can see the past. He saw the wedding. He saw the tower. The word of a crippled boy with magic visions. The word of a Stark. In the north, a Stark's word is proof enough. In the north? I'm not northern. No. You're Targaryen, and so am I. And the dragons know it. The Godswood held the silence. The red leaves of the weirwood stirring in a wind that was not natural. The old god's breath. The response of the North's magic to the conversation that was happening at its roots. I don't want to be your enemy, Jon said. I don't want the Iron Throne. I want the North. I want to fight the dead. The White Walkers, the Long Night, the thing that is coming from beyond the wall, and that will kill everyone. Stark, Targaryen, Lannister, if we don't stop it. You want me to ignore your claim. I want you to believe me when I say the claim doesn't interest me. Men who say power doesn't interest them are the most dangerous men alive. Because they're either lying or they're saints. And saints are more dangerous than liars. Because saints believe their own righteousness. I'm not a saint. I'm a man who knows what's coming from the north and who needs your dragons to stop it. My dragons. Your dragons. I'm not Daenerys. I'm not trying to take your dragons. Rhaegal came to me. I didn't call him. I didn't summon him. I walked in a field and the dragon landed and the blood bond activated. I can't control it any more than you can. I can control it. They're my children. They respond to me. They respond to blood. Your blood and mine. We're the same family. We are not the same. No, we're not. Jon looked at the Queen, the woman who was his aunt, the woman who had crossed the world with fire and who was standing in a godswood in the frozen north, being told that her dynasty, her dragons, her singular identity as the last Targaryen were not as singular as she had believed. We're not the same, but we are family. And the family is the two of us, the last two Targaryens. And whatever we are to each other, allies, rivals, whatever the politics demand, the family is real. Daenerys held this. Family, she said. The word wasn't warm. The word was a test, the Queen tasting the concept, evaluating it, deciding whether family was a weapon or a vulnerability. Family. I need time, Daenerys said. To process this, the claim, the blood, the dragons, all of it. Take whatever time you need. I need more time than you're offering. The dead don't wait for us to process our family drama. Don't make jokes. I'm not joking. The dead are coming. They're coming faster than either of us is comfortable with, and they don't care whether we've sorted out our succession issues. We fight them together, or we die separately. Daenerys looked at him. Together, she said. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. The Queen acknowledging the reality without endorsing the arrangement. For the dead, after the dead, after the dead, we figure it out. We figure it out. Together. You keep saying that word. It's the only word that works. Daenerys left the godswood. Jon stayed. He sat at the heart tree, the place where Stark sat when the world was too heavy for standing, and he felt the three fires in his blood. Drogon, distant, fierce. Daenerys's fire. Rhaegal, close, warm, the bond already deepening. Viserion, uncertain, unstable, the third presence that was not yet a bond but that was pressing on Jon's consciousness with the restless energy of a creature that had not decided. Three fires. One man. The dead were coming. And Jon Snow, Jon Targaryen, Aegon, whatever name the world chose, was sitting in a godswood with three dragonfires in his blood and a war on his doorstep, and the certainty that the person he needed most as an ally had just left the godswood, uncertain whether he was her family or her enemy. The War Council. What fire and ice looked like at a table. The War Council was held in Winterfell's Great Hall, and the council was the first time Jon understood what 3 dragons and 2 Targaryens did to a room full of lords. The room was divided. Not formally, the seating was mixed, northern lords and southern allies interspersed, but the division was visible in the postures, the glances, the small physical expressions of allegiance and suspicion that political bodies produced when the power structure was unclear. The northern lords, the Mormonts, the Umbers, the Manderleys, the Glovers, sat on Jon's side. Not because Jon had assigned sides, but because gravity worked. The northern lords orbited the northern king, the way they had orbited Ned and Robb before him. Daenerys' allies, Tyrion Lannister, her hand, Missandei, Grey Worm, Varys, sat on the Queen's side. Not because the Queen had assigned sides, but because the same gravity worked. The southern court orbited the southern Queen. The two gravitational fields met in the middle, and the meeting was the tension. "The dead are marching," Jon said, opening the council. The king in the north, standing at the head of the table, the maps spread before him, the intelligence reports from the wall laid out in the organized precision of a man who had been tracking the threat for months. "The Night King's army is—" He stopped. The number was too large for casual delivery. "Estimates say 100,000. Maybe more. The dead don't need supplies. They don't need rest. They march until they reach the wall, and then they—" "The wall has held for 8,000 years, Tyrion said, because Tyrion said things that needed saying. "The wall has never faced 100,000 dead men, led by creatures that can reanimate every corpse on the battlefield." "A fair point. The plan is this." Jon moved to the map. "We combine forces, the Northern Army, the Queen's armies, the Night's Watch, whatever allies we can bring. We hold the wall. We use the dragons." The word hung. Dragons. Whose dragons? "We use the dragons to break the army of the dead. Fire kills the whites. Dragon fire kills them faster." "My dragons," Daenerys said, the possessive again. "The wall. The Queen's dragons. Under the Queen's command." Jon held the correction. Rhaegal was his. The bond was real. The connection was established. But the council was not the place for that claim. The council was the place for the alliance. And the alliance required the fiction that the dragons belonged to one person. Tyrion saw through the fiction. Of course he did. Tyrion saw through everything. The dwarf's intelligence cutting through surfaces, the way a blade cut through cloth. "The dragons," Tyrion said, leaning forward, "seem to have developed an interest in the king in the north. An interest that was not anticipated." "Rhaegal approached me," Jon said. "The dragon and I have a connection." "A connection?" Tyrion looked at Jon. The look was the Tyrion look, piercing, amused, the assessment of a mind that was evaluating a dozen possibilities simultaneously and finding most of them entertaining. "Would this connection have anything to do with the rumors about your parentage?" The room shifted. "My parentage is not the subject of this council," Jon said. "Your parentage is the subject of everything, King Snow. If the rumors are true, and the dragon's behavior suggests they are, then you are not King Snow. You are King Targaryen, or Prince Targaryen, or Aegon Targaryen. The naming depends on the context, but the blood is the blood regardless." "Tyrion," Daenerys began, "the lords deserve to know." Tyrion's voice was not cruel. It was pragmatic, the hand's duty to ensure that the alliance was built on truth rather than fiction, because alliances built on fiction collapsed under pressure, and pressure was coming in the form of 100,000 dead men. If the king in the north is a Targaryen, if the dragons respond to him because of Targaryen blood, then the power dynamic in this room is not what people think it is. "The power dynamic in this room is irrelevant if the dead kill everyone in it," Jon said. "We can discuss my blood after we've used it to survive." "That's fair," Tyrion said. "And also a deflection. It's a prioritization. The dead first, the blood second." "Agreed." Tyrion drank. "But the blood is second, not never." The council continued. Plans were made. Troop dispositions, supply arrangements, the logistics of moving 3 armies to the wall in winter. The plans were competent and thorough and produced by the combined intelligence of 2 courts. But the plans were not the thing the room remembered. The thing the room remembered was the moment, the brief, charged, politically explosive moment when the king in the north had been identified as a Targaryen, and the queen's face had done the thing that queen's faces did when the ground shifted beneath them. The thing the room remembered was the crack. Viserion. The problem. Viserion was the dragon nobody could predict. Drogon was Daenerys's. The black dragon, the largest, the fiercest, the mount of the queen, Drogon's loyalty was absolute. Drogon responded to Daenerys and to Daenerys alone. When Jon approached Drogon, the black dragon's response was hostility, not the curiosity that Rhaegal had shown, but the territorial aggression of a creature that had chosen its rider and that viewed any other claimant as a threat. Jon did not push the issue with Drogon. He did not need to. The bond he was developing with Rhaegal was consuming enough without adding the complexity of a hostile dragon. Rhaegal was Jon's. The green dragon, named for Rhaegar, drawn to Rhaegar's son, Rhaegal's bond with Jon was deepening daily. The nightly visits became longer. The physical contact became more sustained. The consciousness connection, the channel between the dragon's mind and Jon's, grew clearer, the impressions becoming more precise, the communication between rider and dragon approaching the seamless unity that Daenerys had with Drogon. Viserion was neither. The cream and gold dragon, named for Viserys, the brother Daenerys had watched die in a crown of molten gold. Viserion was unstable. Not in the violent sense. The dragon was not aggressive, not hostile, not the raging beast that legends warned about. Viserion was unstable in the psychological sense. The dragon's loyalties were unclear, the creature's responses unpredictable, the bond capacity divided between Daenerys, who had hatched it, and Jon, whose blood called to it. Viserion circled Winterfell at night, not the territorial circling of a dragon establishing dominance, the uncertain circling of a creature that did not know where to land. The dragon flew between the field where Rhaegal nested, near Jon, and the camp where Drogon roosted, near Daenerys. The flight path, a physical manifestation of the dragon's divided loyalty. "He's confused," Jon said to Daenerys. On the wall, the two of them and the three dragons, the preparation for the battle that was coming, the uncomfortable proximity that the war demanded. Viserion, he's reaching for something and he can't decide what. He's reaching for his mother. He's reaching for blood. His mother's blood and mine. Yours. The word was sharp. The Daenerys sharp. The Queen's displeasure compressed into a single syllable. Viserion has been mine since he hatched. In Korth, in the Red Waste, in Meereen. He has been mine through fire and siege and assassination attempts and the crossing of the narrow sea. He does not know you. His blood knows me. Blood is not knowledge. Blood is chemistry, an accident of genetics. Knowledge is the years I spent raising him, feeding him, protecting him from the people who would have chained him or killed him. I'm not arguing with you about this. Good, because the argument is over. It was not over. Viserion came to Jon 3 nights before the battle. The cream and gold dragon, smaller than Drogon, more agile than Rhaegal, the dragon whose name carried the burden of a dead brother's legacy, landed in the field where Rhaegal rested and where Jon sat in the evenings, the nightly communion with the green dragon that had become Jon's rhythm. Viserion's landing startled Rhaegal. The green dragon shifted, not aggressive but alert, the predator's response to the arrival of a sibling who was not expected. The two dragons looked at each other. The looking was not hostile. It was assessing. The mutual evaluation of two creatures who had grown up together and who were now, for the first time, sharing a space that was defined by someone other than their mother. Jon felt Viserion's consciousness touch his. The touching was different from Rhaegal's. Rhaegal's consciousness was warm, steady. The green dragon's mind a measured presence that fit beside the wolf bond without displacing it. Viserion's consciousness was erratic, bright, fast, the mind of a creature that processed the world at a higher frequency than its siblings, the dragon whose intelligence was sharper but whose stability was less. The contact was uncomfortable. Not painful, uncomfortable. The way wearing a piece of clothing that did not fit was uncomfortable. Jon's mind stretched to accommodate the third presence. Wolf, green dragon, gold dragon, and the stretching was the beginning of the cost. He felt it immediately. The headache, not a normal headache, not the dull ache of fatigue or dehydration. A pressure headache, the compression of a mind that was designed to hold one consciousness, and that was now holding three. The pressure was behind his eyes, in his temples, in the space between his thoughts where the thinking happened, the cognitive machinery straining under the load. 3, Jon said, to himself, in the field, with 2 dragons and a wolf and the night sky above. 3 minds. In one, the pressure did not ease. The pressure was the beginning of the first cost, the personal cost, the tax that 3 dragon bonds levied on the single human mind that held them. Jon did not tell Daenerys about Viserion's visit. He did not tell her because the telling would have produced the conversation that neither of them was ready for. The conversation about what it meant that all 3 of her dragons were responding to her nephew's blood. The conversation that would force the question of whether the mother of dragons was still the mother, or whether the mothering was being... The word was impossible, but the concept was unavoidable, shared. He carried the 3rd bond alone. He carried it the way he carried everything, inside, compressed. The stark habit of absorbing weight without showing it. The habit served him in courts and councils and the daily politics of governance. The habit was going to fail him with the dragons, because the dragon's weight was not political or emotional. It was cognitive. The 3 minds pressing on his one mind were not problems to be managed. They were presences to be held, and the holding was consuming the capacity that Jon needed for everything else. He slept less, not by choice. The 3 connections buzzed in his mind at night. The dragon consciousnesses more active in the dark. The predator's instincts heightened by the nighttime, when the world was theirs. Jon lay in his bed at Winterfell and felt Drogon's distant hostility, Rhaegal's warm presence, Viserion's erratic brightness, the 3 fires burning in his mind while he tried to rest. He dreamed their dreams. Rhaegal's dreams were of flight, the endless sky, the wind under wings, the world from above. Viserion's dreams were of fire, the consuming, the burning, the joy of destruction that was the dragon's purest instinct. And Drogon's dreams, Drogon, who was not bonded to Jon but whose presence Jon could feel through the blood. Drogon's dreams were of Daenerys, the silver-haired woman, the mother, the first face. Even in dreams, Drogon was hers. Jon woke exhausted. Every morning, the fatigue accumulating, the sleep debt growing. The man who was supposed to lead the defense of the wall against 100,000 dead men, running on 3 hours of dragon-disrupted sleep, and the declining cognitive capacity that sleep deprivation produced. "You look terrible," Davos said. Sir Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, the advisor who had been with Jon since Castle Black, and who had the commoner's bluntness that Jon valued above the Lord's diplomacy. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You look like a man who hasn't slept in a week. Your eyes are doing a thing." "What thing?" "A gold thing. In the edges. Your eyes are grey, but the edges are turning. Gold." Jon went to a mirror. He looked at his eyes. Grey. Stark grey. But at the edges, at the outer rim of the iris, where the colour met the white, a ring of gold. Not much. Not obvious. The beginning of something that was not quite human. The dragons were changing him. Not metaphorically. Physically. The 3 bonds were producing a change in Jon's body that was not documented in any Targaryen history, because no Targaryen had ever held 3 bonds simultaneously. The Targaryen dragon lords had been one rider, one dragon, the singular connection producing the physical changes that the histories did document, the fire resistance, the heat tolerance, the affinity for flame that all dragon riders developed. 3 bonds were producing 3 times the change, and the change was visible in the gold that was bleeding into Jon's grey eyes. Sansa came to Jon's chambers the day after the battle. She came because Sansa was the Stark who managed things, the practical sister, the politician, the woman who saw the consequences that the warriors missed. She came because the consequences of the battle were not military, the wall had held, but political. The world now knew what Jon could do. The ravens are already flying, Sansa said. Cersei knows, Stannis knows, or what's left of Stannis. The Tyrells know. Within a week, every lord in the 7 kingdoms will know that you commanded 3 dragons simultaneously during a 12-hour battle. Commanded is a strong word. Commanded is the word the reports are using, the word the world will use, the word that every lord who receives a raven will process as, the bastard of Winterfell controls 3 dragons. Sansa sat. I need to know your plan. My plan is to sleep for a week. After the sleeping, I plan to sleep for another week. Jon, I don't have a plan, Sansa. I barely survived the battle. I held 3 dragon bonds for 12 hours, and the holding nearly dissolved my mind into the dragons' minds. My eyes are turning gold. I can sense body heat through walls. I dream in 3 colors simultaneously. I don't have a plan. I have a condition. Sansa looked at her brother, her cousin, the man who had been raised beside her, and who she had spent her childhood dismissing. The bastard, the half-brother, the boy who didn't quite count, and who was now the most powerful person in the known world, and who was sitting on his bed with gold eyes and shaking hands, and the look of a man who had been through something that words could not contain. Then I'll make the plan, Sansa said. That's what I do. You carry the dragons. I'll manage the politics. The politics of what? The politics of a man with 3 dragons, which is the most complicated political situation since Aegon landed at the Blackwater. She stood. Eat something. Sleep. Let me handle the ravens. You sound like Mother. I'll take that as a compliment. It was 1. Sansa left. Jon sat on his bed and felt the 3 fires and the exhaustion and the gold in his eyes and the weight that was not getting lighter. Arya came next. Not to plan. To check. She came through the door without knocking. Arya never knocked. And looked at Jon and did the Arya assessment, which was faster than Sansa's and blunter than Sansa's, and arrived at the conclusion in 4 seconds. You look like shit. Thank you. Your eyes are gold. I know. Are you still you? The question that mattered more than all of Sansa's politics and all of Daenerys' teaching and all of the world's fear. The question of a sister who loved her brother and who needed to know that the brother was still the brother and not the fire. I'm still me, Jon said. Prove it. How? What did I make you promise when I was 8? That I'd teach you to use a sword, even though Catelyn said girls don't use swords. And did you? I gave you needle. You gave me needle. Arya crossed the room. She sat beside him on the bed, the small sister beside the dragonrider, the wolf beside the fire. You're still you. The edges are blurring. The edges have always been blurry. You've always been the bastard and the brother and the Stark and the not Stark. Adding dragon to the list doesn't change the fundamental Jon. It just makes the list longer. That's the most philosophical thing you've ever said. I've been saving it for an occasion. Is this the occasion? My brother just flew 3 dragons against an army of the dead, and his eyes turned gold. If this isn't the occasion, nothing is. Jon held this. The sister, the wolf girl, the Arya who had never changed, not in Braavos, not through the training, not through the killing. The core Arya, the irreducible northernness that no amount of transformation could erase. Stay, Jon said, for a while. Talk to me about, not dragons, not politics, not the dead. Something normal. Normal. Anything. I trained with Brienne yesterday. She's the best swordswoman I've ever fought. Better than you. Better with a greatsword. Not better with a short blade. I'm faster. You were always faster. I was always better. But say faster if it makes you comfortable. Jon almost laughed. The man who was carrying 3 dragonfires and the weight of the world's fear, finding enough of himself to almost laugh at his sister's competitive assessment of a sparring match. Stay, Jon said. I'm staying. Good. They sat. The brother and the sister, the dragonrider and the wolf girl, the 2 Starks who had been closest since childhood and who were, in this moment, the proof that the fire could not consume the ice because the ice was the family and the family held. The dragons are in me, Jon said. To the mirror. To himself. They're changing me. The mirror did not respond. The eyes looked back. Grey and gold. Ice and fire. The 2 things he was and the 2 things the dragons were making more visible. The first cost was being paid. The battle. What 3 dragons did to the dead. The dead came on a morning that was not a morning. The sky was dark, not the ordinary dark of a winter dawn, but the supernatural dark of the long night, the cold that produced darkness, the darkness that was not the absence of light, but the presence of something that consumed light. The dead marched south under the dark, 100,000 corpses animated by the Night King's magic, the blue-eyed army that had been building beyond the wall for 8,000 years, and that was now, finally, arriving. The wall held, for the first hour, 800 Night's Watchmen and 20,000 combined northern and southern soldiers on the ice, fighting the dead with steel and fire, and the desperate coordination of men who knew that losing this battle meant losing the world. Then the Night King's generals breached the eastern section. The breach was not dramatic, not a collapse, not an explosion. The ice simply opened. The cold that the Night King commanded was colder than the cold that built the wall, and the colder cold overwhelmed the ancient magic, and the ice that had held for 8,000 years came apart like a dam breaking. The dead poured through. Jon was on the wall when the breach happened. He felt it through Rhaegal, the green dragon circling above, the dragon's perception of the breach arriving in Jon's mind before the visual or the sound. The breach was heat, not fire, but the heat of magic breaking, the energy released by the wall's failure radiating outward like the shockwave from an explosion. The eastern section is gone, Jon said. To Daenerys. The 2 Targaryens on the wall, the 2 dragonriders, the war forcing them into proximity despite the political distance that the truth had created. How many through? Thousands. Already. Jon looked east. The breach was visible, the gap in the wall, the dark shapes pouring through, the army of the dead entering the world south of the wall for the first time in 8,000 years. We need the dragons. Daenerys looked at him. All 3, Jon said. The all was the thing. Not 2, all 3. The breach was too large for 1 dragon. The dead were too many for 2. 3 dragons, flying in coordination, breathing fire in overlapping patterns, covering the breach and the ground below it. 3 was the number that the battle required. Drogon answers to me, Daenerys said. Rhaegal answers to you. Viserion. Viserion answers to both of us, or neither. I don't know. That's not reassuring. It's honest. They flew. Daenerys on Drogon, Jon on Rhaegal, Viserion. Viserion flew between them, the cream and gold dragon holding the middle position, the unstable element, in a formation of 3. The formation was Daenerys' idea. Triangle, she said, on the wall's top. Minutes before the flight, the 2 Targaryens standing in the wind, the ice under their boots, the dawn that was not a dawn, the supernatural dark pressing south, the cold that consumed light. Drogon takes the center, Rhaegal left flank, Viserion right. The fire overlaps in the gaps. I've never flown in formation. You've never flown in battle. You've never flown with 2 other dragons. You've never held 3 bonds during combat. There are a lot of things you've never done. We're doing them all today. That's reassuring. It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be clear. Daenerys looked at Jon. The violet eyes, fierce, focused. The Queen's battle face that was not the political face or the diplomatic face, but the face that had burned slave cities and crossed the Dothraki Sea. Can you hold the bonds during the fighting? I don't know. That's not good enough. It's honest. Honest doesn't save the wall. Can you hold them? Jon felt the 3 fires. Rhaegal, steady, warm, ready. Viserion, bright, erratic, eager in a way that was not quite stable. Drogon, distant, hostile, the black dragon's consciousness grudgingly acknowledging Jon's presence because the battle demanded it. I can hold them, Jon said. I don't know what the holding costs. Everything worth doing costs something. Did you just quote my family's philosophy at me? Your family's philosophy is useful. Don't ruin it by claiming ownership. Jon almost smiled. The moment of connection between 2 people who were allies and rivals and family, and who were about to fly into a war against the dead together. The moment before the moments that would test everything they were. Triangle formation, Jon said. I'll hold the flanks. Hold the flanks and hold yourself. If you lose the self in the bonds, if the 3 minds overwhelm the one, I know. You fall, and a dragonrider who falls during combat doesn't land. He drops. I won't fall. Promise me. The words. Again. The echo across lives and lifetimes, and the Targaryen habit of extracting promises before battles, because the Targaryens had always known, that the battles were the places where the promises were needed most. I promise. They mounted. Daenerys on Drogon, the black dragon's wings extending, the Queen's body settling into the familiar space between the shoulder ridges. Jon on Rhaegal, the green dragon's consciousness flowing through the bond, the warmth that said, ready. Viserion launched independently, the gold dragon choosing its own moment, the instability producing the unpredictability that was both Viserion's weakness and Viserion's strength. 3 dragons rose from the wall. The rising was the sight that the men on the wall would remember for the rest of their lives. 3 shapes against the supernatural dark. 3 pairs of wings beating. 3 fires visible in the throats of 3 creatures that were the last line of defense between the living and the end of the world. The rising produced a sound, not a roar, but a harmony. The 3 wing beats producing a chord that was felt more than heard. The vibration traveling through the ice and into the bones of every man standing on it. The men on the wall cheered. Not because the cheering changed anything, because the cheering was the only response available to men who were watching 3 dragons fly into the dark to fight the dead. The cheering was hope made audible. Jon felt all 3. Through the bonds, through the blood, through the war connection that was the Stark gift and the Targaryen gift combined. Drogon's consciousness was at the edge of his awareness, hostile, reluctant, the black dragon permitting the connection only because the battle demanded it. Rhaegal's consciousness was full and warm, the green dragon's mind aligned with Jon's, the partnership that months of bonding had produced. Viserion's consciousness was bright, erratic, the gold dragon's mind flickering between Jon and Daenerys, the loyalty divided, the creature uncertain of which fire to follow. Jon held all 3. He held them the way a man held 3 burning coals. Carefully, painfully, the heat too much for the hands, and the dropping too dangerous to contemplate. The 3 dragon minds pressed on his one human mind, and the pressing was the thing that no Targaryen had ever survived, because no Targaryen had ever attempted it. He survived. He survived because the survival was necessary, and because Jon Snow, Jon Targaryen, the bastard, The king, the prince, the man with ice and fire in his blood, was built for the holding. The stark stubbornness that had held through 8,000 winters held now against 3 dragonfires in the sky above the wall, while the dead poured through the breach and the world needed saving. They flew over the breach. Drogon breathed first. The black fire, Drogon's fire, the hottest of the 3, the fire that had burned slave masters and culls and the enemies of the mother of dragons. The fire hit the dead, and the dead burned, and the burning cleared 100-yard swath through the army that was pouring through the breach. Rhaegal breathed second. The green fire, Rhaegal's fire, Jon's fire, the flame that was Rhaegar's legacy, and Lyanna's blood, and the North's need. The fire overlapped Drogon's, covering the ground that Drogon's breath had missed, the 2 fires creating a wall of flame across the breach. Viserion breathed third. Viserion's fire was gold. Not the red-black of Drogon or the green of Rhaegal. Gold, the colour of the dragon's scales. The fire that was brightest and most unpredictable, and that hit the dead with a force that scattered the corpses like leaves in a wind. 3 fires, 3 dragons, 1 breach. The breach was sealed, not by ice but by fire. The dragon fire burning so hot that the ground itself melted, the stone beneath the ice liquefying, the liquid rock flowing into the gap and cooling into a barrier that was not the wall but that served the same purpose. A line between the living and the dead. A line made of fire and held by 3 dragons and 2 Targaryens and the one man who was connected to all 3. Jon felt the holding cost him. The 3 minds, 3 fires, 3 presences, 3 dragon consciousnesses. The 3 pressed on his mind with an intensity that was beyond fatigue, beyond headache, beyond the gradual erosion of the previous weeks. The battle intensity was different. The battle required coordination, not just holding the bonds, but using them, directing the 3 dragons in a formation that covered the breach, communicating with 3 minds simultaneously while flying on one. The pressure was behind his eyes. The pressure was in his temples. The pressure was in the space between his thoughts, the cognitive corridor that separated one idea from the next. The corridor now occupied by 3 dragon minds that left no room for Jon's own thoughts. He was losing himself. The erosion was not gradual during battle. It was sudden, violent. The 3 minds pressing with battle intensity that was orders of magnitude beyond the resting state bonds. Rhaegal's consciousness was a green inferno. The dragon's combat instincts activated, the predator at full power, the ancient creature doing the thing it was designed for and producing a consciousness output that filled Jon's mind like water filling a cup. The cup was overflowing. Viserion's consciousness was worse. The gold dragon's erratic nature amplified in combat, the instability producing bursts of perception that arrived in Jon's mind without warning, without pattern, the sensory equivalent of lightning strikes that interrupted Jon's own thoughts and replaced them with the dragon's. Jon saw through Viserion's eyes for 3 seconds. Not the impression, the actual visual feed, the thermal landscape of the battlefield seen from the gold dragon's altitude. The dead spread across the frozen ground like a carpet of blue-eyed cold. The 3 seconds were the longest of Jon's life, because the 3 seconds were not Jon's. They were Viserion's. And the being Viserion was the disappearance of Jon, the total replacement of one consciousness by another. He came back. The return was a gasp, the physical manifestation of a mind snapping back to its own body, the psychic equivalent of surfacing from a dive. He was on Rhaegal's back. He was Jon. He was flying over the dead. He was shaking. The shaking was the self asserting itself. The self saying, "I am here. I am still here." The dragon took me for 3 seconds and I came back. And the coming back is the thing that proves I'm still a man. But the 3 seconds had been 3 seconds of not being a man. 3 seconds of being a dragon. 3 seconds that showed Jon what the future held if the bonds consumed the self. Dissolution. The total loss of Jonness into dragonness. The man disappearing into the fire, and the fire burning without the man's guidance, and the guideless fire burning everything. He held tighter. He held the edges, the boundaries that Daenerys had not yet taught him, but that he was discovering through combat. The desperate, intuitive edge-holding that was the only thing between Jon and the dissolution. The edges were the stark in him, the ice, the cold, the northern stubbornness that had held through 8,000 winters, and that was holding now against 3 dragonfires in the sky above the wall. The ice held the fire. The fire did not consume the ice. The man survived. He was losing himself, not dramatically, gradually. The erosion of the self that the 3 bonds produced, the identity blurring at the edges, the Jonness dissolving into the dragonness. He could feel it, the feeling of being less himself and more them, the sensation of the man disappearing under the weight of 3 ancient fires. "Jon!" Daenerys' voice, across the sky, through the wind, the queen on Drogon's back, the silver hair streaming, the violet eyes even at this distance, seeing what Jon was becoming. "Jon!" He held. He held because the alternative was letting go, and letting go meant the 3 dragons went their separate ways, and the breach was undefended, and the dead poured through, and the world ended. He held because the holding was the thing he was for, not the throne, not the name, not the politics, the holding, the standing between the fire and the ice, and keeping both from consuming the world. The battle lasted 12 hours. 12 hours of dragonfire and sword steel, and the grinding, exhausting, impossible work of killing 100,000 dead men and the creatures that commanded them. The dead fell. The others retreated, driven north by the fire, by the combined force of 3 dragons and 2 armies, and the walls remaining magic. The retreat was not a defeat. The others were not destroyed. But the retreat was enough. The breach was sealed. The dead were burned. The wall held. The long night was pushed back. Jon landed Rhaegal on the wall's top as the dawn came. Not the supernatural dawn, the real dawn. The sun's light returning after 12 hours of magical darkness, the light hitting the ice and producing the golden glow that the wall was famous for. He dismounted. He collapsed. Not a dramatic collapse, a controlled descent. The body that had been holding 3 dragon bonds for 12 hours finally releasing, the muscles failing, the mind releasing the pressure that had been building since the battle began. He fell to his knees on the ice. Rhaegal's head came down beside him, the green dragon's concern, the creature's awareness that its rider was damaged. Viserion circled above, the gold dragon's uncertainty, the creature's divided loyalty, producing the uncertainty about where to be. Drogon was with Daenerys, 50 yards down the wall. Jon knelt on the ice and felt the 3 fires and felt the cost. His eyes were gold. Not gold at the edges, gold. The grey was still there, but the gold was dominant. The dragon change accelerated by 12 hours of battle intensity, the 3 bonds rewriting the physical template of a man who had been stark grey his entire life, and who was now, after the battle, something else. Jon, Davos, the Onion Knight, running along the wall. "Jon, your eyes." "I know." "There, I know." Jon knelt on the ice and looked at the dawn and felt the 3 fires burning in his mind and knew that the man who had ridden into the sky above the breach was not the man who had come down. The man who had come down was more than human, more than Targaryen, more than Stark. More was not better. More was the cost. The aftermath, what victory produced. The victory at the wall saved the world and ruined everything else. The world south of the wall woke to the news that the long night had come and gone in 12 hours, that the ancient threat, the bedtime story, the impossible army of the dead had arrived and been repelled by 3 dragons and 2 Targaryens, and a combined military force that had held the ice while the sky burned. The world south of the wall also woke to the news that a single man had commanded all 3 dragons during the battle. Not ridden, commanded. The reports were confused and contradictory, as battlefield reports always were, but the core was consistent. Jon Snow, Jon Targaryen, the hidden prince, the secret heir, had maintained simultaneous bonds with Drogon, Rhaegal, and Viserion during the 12-hour battle, directing their fire in coordinated patterns that no single rider should have been capable of managing. 1 man, 3 dragons. The world did what the world always did with information it could not process. It panicked. In King's Landing, Cersei Lannister received the reports with the cold assessment of a queen whose power was based on the absence of dragons, and whose power was now threatened by the presence of 3 of them under the control of a man she had never anticipated. Cersei did not panic. Cersei calculated. The calculation was simple. A man with 3 dragons was a man who could take any throne in the world, and the only defense against a man with 3 dragons was to make sure the man never reached the throne he could take. "Scorpion bolts," Cersei said to Qyburn. "Every castle in the Crownlands, every fortress on the road south. If the dragon man comes south, we shoot." 3 dragons, Your Grace. Scorpion bolts killed 1 dragon in 300 years. Then build better bolts. In Highgarden, or what was left of Highgarden, the Tyrells diminished by the war, the reach assessed. A man with 3 dragons was a man to be courted, not fought. The Reach's tradition of joining the winning side suggested that the winning side had just been identified with overwhelming clarity. In Dorne, the Martells assessed differently. A Targaryen heir with 3 dragons was, for Dorne, which had survived the conquest by killing a dragon, a familiar threat. Dorne had bent to no conqueror, and Dorne would bend to no dragonrider, regardless of how many dragons the dragonrider possessed. In the Iron Islands, in the Riverlands, in the Stormlands, in every corner of the 7 kingdoms, the calculation was the same. What did you do about a man with 3 dragons? The answer was either submit or resist, and the choosing between the 2 was the thing that the post-battle world forced every lord and every house and every faction to do. Jon wanted neither. Jon wanted to go home. Jon wanted to go back to Winterfell and sit in the Godswood and hold Ghost and feel the cold northern air on his face and be for 1 hour the man he had been before the dragons. The man whose eyes were grey. The man whose dreams were his own. The man who could sleep without 3 dragon fires burning in his skull. He could not go home. The dragons would not let him. Not literally, the dragons did not chain him, did not restrict his movement, did not prevent him from riding south to Winterfell. But the bonds held him. The 3 connections, Rhaegal constant, Viserion erratic, Drogon hostile, the connections kept his mind in the sky, even when his body was on the ground. The dragons were in him. The dragons were part of him. And the part of himness made going home impossible, because home was a place for a man, and Jon was becoming something that was more than a man and less than a man simultaneously. "You're losing weight," Davos said, at Winterfell, 2 weeks after the battle. "And sleep. And you're losing something I can't name." "I'm losing myself. That's the thing I can't name." 3 dragon bonds, in 1 mind. The Targaryens never did this, Davos. 1 rider, 1 dragon, that was the rule. I'm holding 3, and the holding is crushing you, eroding me, not dramatically, not the big collapse, the small erosion, the edges of who I am getting softer, the Jonness dissolving into the dragonness. I wake up, and for a moment, half a heartbeat, less. I don't know whether I'm Jon or Rhaegal or Viserion or Some combination that doesn't have a name. Can you break the bonds? I don't know. I don't know if the bonds can be broken. The Targaryen histories say the bond lasts until the rider dies or the dragon dies. Breaking is not. It's not in the literature. The literature was written by people who never held three bonds. The literature was written by people who were smart enough not to try. Davos looked at Jon, at the gold eyes, at the weight loss, the sleeplessness, the slow physical transformation that the three bonds were producing. You need help, Davos said. I need the one person who understands dragons. And that person is the person I've taken the dragons from. You haven't taken, I have. Not intentionally, not by choice. But the result is the same. 3 dragons that were hers now respond to me. The mother of dragons watching her children choose someone else. That's taking, however you frame it. Then talk to her. She's not talking to me. Then make her talk to you. You can't make a dragon queen do anything. That's sort of the defining characteristic. Daenerys, the mother who watched. Daenerys was not talking to Jon because Daenerys was processing, and processing, for Daenerys Targaryen, was an internal war that made the battle at the wall look simple. She was the mother of dragons. The title was not a title, it was an identity. She had walked into fire. She had hatched 3 eggs that the world said were stone. She had raised 3 dragons from creatures the size of kittens to creatures the size of castles, feeding them, protecting them, disciplining them, loving them with the fierce, unconditional, Targaryen love that was the only love she had left in a world that had taken everything else. The dragons were her children. Not metaphorically, actually. In the absence of the family that had been killed and exiled and destroyed, in the absence of the dynasty that had been burned to the ground by Robert's rebellion, in the absence of every Targaryen who should have been there and was not, the dragons were her family. Drogon, Rhaegal, Viserion, the 3 names, the 3 fires, the 3 reasons she had survived the crossing and the conquering and the long years of building a kingdom from nothing. And now a nephew she had not known existed was taking them from her. Not taking. She knew, intellectually, in the part of her mind that was rational and political and capable of assessment, she knew that Jon was not taking. Jon was receiving. The dragons were choosing. And the choosing was the dragon's right. And the dragon's choice was not Jon's fault. But the knowing did not help. The knowing did not help because the feeling was older than the knowing and stronger than the knowing, and the feeling was loss. The gut-level, primal, maternal loss of watching your children reach for someone else. The loss that was not death, and that was, in some ways, worse than death, because death was final, and this was ongoing. The daily, incremental transfer of loyalty from the mother to the, what was he? The uncle, the cousin, the rival. You're sulking, Tyrion said, because Tyrion said everything. I am not sulking. Missandei had come before Tyrion. Missandei always came before Tyrion, because Missandei's arrival was not the arrival of an advisor, but the arrival of a friend, and friends preceded advisors, the way feelings preceded analysis. Your Grace. Missandei stood in the doorway, the Nathi woman, the former slave, the translator, the person who had been at Daenerys' side through Astapor and Yunkai and Meereen and the Crossing, the person who had watched the dragons grow from creatures the size of kittens, and who had been there for every feeding and every crisis and every moment of the mothering that had defined Daenerys' identity. Missandei. I don't want company. I know you don't want company. That's why I'm here. Missandei sat, without invitation, without the deference that the Queen's position required, because Missandei was the one person in Daenerys' court who was permitted to ignore the deference because the friendship predated the court and the court was built on the friendship. Rhaegal went to him again last night, Daenerys said. I heard. 3 nights in a row. My dragon, flying to a man I met a week ago because his blood calls louder than my bond. The blood doesn't call louder. The blood calls differently. The distinction doesn't help. It might, if you think about it. Missandei looked at her queen. At the woman under the queen, the girl from Astapor who had been alone and afraid and who had found in the dragons the family that the world had taken from her. Your bond with Rhaegal is maternal. You hatched him. You raised him. You are his mother. Jon Snow's bond is something else. Something ancestral, maybe. The blood recognizing the blood across a distance of generations. You're saying my son recognizes his cousin's blood? I'm saying the bond is not a competition. Your bond and Jon Snow's bond are not the same bond. They don't replace each other. They coexist. I don't want them to coexist. I want them to... Daenerys stopped. The stopping was the Targaryen composure cracking under the Targaryen emotion, the queen's control failing against the mother's pain. I want my children to be mine. They are yours. They will always be yours. The man who bonds with a dragon does not become the dragon's mother. He becomes something else. An uncle, maybe. A cousin. A member of the family who is not the parent. I don't have a family. You have a nephew. The silence was long. I don't want a nephew, Daenerys said. I know, but wanting and having are different things, and having is what we're dealing with. Missandei's hand found Daenerys's. The touch, the simple, human touch that had nothing to do with dragons or thrones or the political earthquake that Jon Snow's existence had produced. The touch that said, I am here. The dragons are not the only ones who love you. He says he doesn't want the throne, Daenerys said. Some men don't want thrones. In my experience, all men want thrones. Your experience is limited to men who wanted something from you. Jon Snow does not seem to want anything from you, except help with the dead. The dead. Always the dead. The dead are real. I've seen the reports. The dead are coming, and the dead don't care about your throne or his blood or the dragon's loyalty. The dead care about killing everything, and killing everything is the one outcome that makes all our other concerns irrelevant. Daenerys held Missandei's hand. When did you become the wise one? Daenerys said. I've always been the wise one. You've been too busy conquering to notice. That's fair. I know. I'm almost always fair. It's my most annoying quality. Daenerys almost smiled. The almost. The same almost that Jon produced. The moment of human warmth in the middle of the fire. The proof that the queen was still a woman underneath the scales of the identity she had built. I'll talk to him, Daenerys said. When? When I'm ready. Be ready soon. The dead don't wait. Everyone keeps saying that, because it keeps being true. You're sitting in a dark room, drinking wine and refusing to see anyone. In the south, we call that sulking. In the north, they probably call it Tuesday. Tyrion, you need to talk to him. I don't need to do anything. You need to talk to him because the alternative is 2 Targaryens with dragons refusing to speak to each other while the entire political world decides whether to submit to them or kill them. And a divided Targaryen front is a vulnerable Targaryen front, and a vulnerable Targaryen front is how the family ended up with only 2 surviving members. Daenerys looked at her hand. The dwarf. The Lannister, who was not a Lannister. The man whose intelligence had been the weapon that had brought her across the narrow sea, and who was now using that intelligence to tell her the thing she did not want to hear. He has my dragons, Daenerys said. He has a connection to your dragons. Not the same thing. Drogon Drogon is yours. Drogon will always be yours. The black dragon imprinted on you at hatching, and the imprint is permanent. Drogon is not the problem. Rhaegal chose Jon. The green dragon is, I'm sorry, Your Grace, but the green dragon has been Jon's since the night in the field. The bond is real. The bond is deep. Fighting it is fighting the dragon's nature, and fighting dragons' natures is the thing that got the Targaryen dragon lords killed. And Viserion? Tyrion was quiet. Viserion is the question, Tyrion said. Viserion is divided. Viserion responds to both of you. Viserion is the dragon that will determine whether the two of you are allies or enemies, because Viserion's loyalty is the swing vote. My dragon's loyalty is a swing vote. In the ugliest possible political framing, yes. Daenerys drank the wine. He says he doesn't want the throne, Daenerys said. He says a lot of things. Men who don't want thrones are either lying or naive, and Jon Snow is not a liar, which leaves naive, and naive men with 3 dragons are the most dangerous things in the world because they don't understand the power they hold and therefore can't anticipate the ways it will be used against them. You think someone will use him? I think everyone will try. Cersei will try to kill him. Varys will try to manage him. The Northern Lords will try to keep him. The Southern Lords will try to court him. And you. Tyrion looked at the Queen. You will have to decide what you do. Kill him, ally with him, marry him, or ignore him. Those are the options. I'm not marrying my nephew. Targaryens have married closer. That's rather the family tradition. I am not. Fine. Then ally or ignore. Killing is messy and produces martyrs. Allies are useful. Ignoring is comfortable but strategically catastrophic. Tyrion set down his cup. Talk to him. The man is drowning under the weight of 3 dragon bonds, and the only person in the world who understands what a dragon bond does to a human mind is you. Help him. Not for politics, for the simple reason that he's your family, and he needs help, and refusing to help, because your feelings are hurt, is beneath you. My feelings are not hurt. Your feelings are devastated. I can see it. The wine can see it. The empty room can see it. You are the mother of dragons, and your dragons are choosing another rider, and the choosing is the most painful thing that has happened to you since. He stopped. Since Meereen. Since the arena. Since the moment Drogon flew away, and you were left alone. Daenerys held the glass. That's what this feels like, she said. The voice was quiet. Not the Queen's voice, but the woman's. The voice that existed underneath the titles. Drogon leaving the arena. The abandonment. But worse, because Drogon came back. Rhaegal is not coming back. Rhaegal has not left you. Rhaegal has expanded. The dragon has 2 riders now. 2 connections. The dragon is not less yours. The dragon is more. More connected. More bound. More divided. More complete. A dragon with 2 Targaryen bonds is a dragon with twice the fire. If you can get past the possession, if you can see Jon as an addition rather than a replacement, then the 3 dragons become stronger, not weaker. I don't know if I can. Then try. Try is all anyone does. The people who succeed at impossible things are the people who tried and were too stubborn to stop. That sounds northern. It is northern. I'm in Winterfell. The northernness is contagious. Daenerys almost smiled. The almost, the crack in the armor, the moment of warmth in the cold. I'll talk to him, Daenerys said. Good. But I'm not calling him Aegon. Call him whatever you want. Just call him. The conversation. What 2 Targaryens said. She came to the Godswood. Jon was at the Heart Tree, the place where he sat when the weight was too heavy for standing. The 3 dragon fires burning in his mind, the gold eyes watching the red sap. The man who was less himself every day sitting in the place that was most himself and trying to hold the distance between the two. Jon, he looked up. Silver hair, violet eyes. The aunt he had not known he had. The queen he needed as an ally. The woman whose children were in his head. Daenerys. She sat beside him. Not across from him, beside him. The positioning was deliberate. The queen choosing proximity over confrontation. The body language of a woman who had decided that whatever this conversation produced, it would not be produced from opposing sides. Your eyes are gold, she said. I know. They were grey. They're still grey. In the center. The edges are changing. The dragons are changing you. 3 of them. At once. The change is accelerated. Daenerys looked at the weirwood, the foreign tree, the northern magic that she did not understand, the carved face that watched with an intelligence she could not reach. When I hatched them, Daenerys said, the bond was immediate, total. I walked into fire and walked out with 3 dragons on my body, and the bond was, it was like breathing. I didn't learn it. I didn't earn it. It was just there. The fire recognized the fire. The fire recognizes my fire too. I know. That's the part that... She stopped. The stopping was the old habit. The queen's habit of not finishing sentences that contain vulnerability. That's the part that hurts. I'm not trying to take them from you. I know you're not. That makes it worse. She looked at him. If you were trying, if you were a conqueror, a rival, a man who wanted the dragons for power, I could fight you. I could hate you. I could be the dragon queen who burned the pretender. But you're not trying. You're not a pretender. You're... She searched. You're a man who doesn't want the power and who got it anyway. That's the cruelest kind of rival, because you can't be defeated. You can only be accepted or helped. Helped. You understand the dragons. You've lived with the bond for years, longer than anyone alive. I've had the bonds for weeks, and Daenerys, they're destroying me. 3 minds in one. I can't sleep. I can't think clearly. My eyes are changing color. I wake up, and for half a heartbeat, I don't know if I'm a man or a dragon. That happens. Does it? The identity blur. The waking moment when you're not sure which fire you are. It happens with 1 dragon. I can't imagine what it's like with 3. It's like drowning in fire, slowly. The fire is warm and the drowning is gradual, and the gradualness makes it feel manageable until you look up and the surface is too far away. Daenerys held this. I can help, she said. The words were not warm. They were practical. The Targaryen pragmatism that had conquered Slaver's Bay and crossed the narrow sea. The bond management. The techniques I've developed for maintaining the self while holding the connection. I can teach you. You do that. I do that because the alternative is watching my nephew dissolve into 3 dragons, and a man who dissolves into dragons is a man who is no longer managing the dragons. And unmanaged dragons are dangerous, catastrophic. 3 unmanaged dragons destroy cities. I've seen what Drogon does without guidance. 3 Drogons without guidance end the world. So helping me is self-defense. Helping you is pragmatism. If I can also help my family in the process, that's a secondary benefit. Family? Family? She held the word differently this time. Not as a test, as an offering. The Targaryen woman offering the Targaryen man the one thing she had left to give that was not a dragon. Connection. All right, Jon said. Teach me. They flew together for the first time the next morning. Not into battle, into practice. Daenerys on Drogon, Jon on Rhaegal, the two Targaryens in the northern sky above the Wolfswood, the first coordinated flight that was not combat but education. The flying together was different from flying alone. Jon had flown Rhaegal dozens of times, the bond flights, the practice runs, the nightly communion that had become the rhythm of his life since the Green Dragon chose him. Flying alone was a conversation between two minds, the man and the dragon, the rider and the mount, the ice and the fire, finding their balance in the sky. Flying with Daenerys was a conversation between 5 minds, Jon, Rhaegal, Daenerys, Drogon, and the diffuse presence of Viserion, who circled below, not participating but watching, the unstable dragon monitoring the formation from a distance that was both physical and psychological. The 5-mind conversation was chaotic. Not hostile, chaotic. Drogon's consciousness pressed against Jon's awareness with territorial aggression, the black dragon's displeasure at Jon's proximity radiating through the blood network. Rhaegal's consciousness responded to Drogon's aggression with protective alertness, the green dragon's instinct to defend its rider activating in the presence of a potential threat. Jon had to manage both, holding Rhaegal's protectiveness while deflecting Drogon's hostility, while maintaining his own consciousness while flying at altitude in the northern cold. "Relax," Daenerys called, across the sky. On Drogon's back, the silver hair streaming, the queen's body settled into the riding posture with the ease of years. "You're tensing." The dragon feels the tension. The tension feeds back through the bond and the dragon tenses too. It's a cycle. Break it. Easy for you to say. Your dragon isn't trying to attack mine. Drogon is not attacking. Drogon is asserting. The assertion feels aggressive. That's because you're reading it through a wolf's instincts. A wolf reads assertion as aggression. A dragon reads assertion as communication. Drogon is telling Rhaegal, "I am the largest." The telling is not hostile, it's information. The information is uncomfortable. The information is accurate. Drogon is the largest. Accept the information and Drogon calms down. Jon accepted the information, not through intellectual decision, through the bond, through the conscious relaxation of the Rhaegal connection, the deliberate standing down that told the green dragon, the black one is not a threat. The standing down was the hardest thing Jon had done in the sky, because the standing down required trusting Daenerys' assessment, and trusting Daenerys was the thing that neither Targaryen had fully achieved. The standing down worked. Drogon's aggression reduced. Not eliminated. Reduced. The black dragon's territorial assertion dimming to a background hum, the acknowledgement that the green dragon and its rider were present but not challenging. The hum was livable. The hum was the baseline that coordinated flight required. "Better," Daenerys said. "Now turn. Both of us. Together." They turned. The two dragons banking in the northern sky, the coordinated movement that required the two riders to communicate through the dragons rather than through words, the impression language that dragon riders used. Turn left, bank, adjust altitude. The communication was imperfect. Jon's impressions arrived in Rhaegal's consciousness with a delay that Daenerys' impressions did not have with Drogon, the experience gap visible in the difference between a smooth turn and a stuttering one. "Your turns are rough," Daenerys said. "I've been doing this for months. You've been doing it for years." "Then learn faster." "Learn faster. That's your advice." "It's the Targaryen advice. We learn fast or we die. The dying is the alternative to the fast. Your family's motivational philosophy needs work." "Our family, remember?" The "our" landed. The possessive that included Jon, the word that acknowledged the blood, the family, the connection that Daenerys was beginning to accept, not warmly, not with the open embrace that a family reunion might have produced, with the grudging, practical, Targaryen acceptance that said, "You are mine. I do not like it. You are mine anyway." They flew for 2 hours, the practice producing the competence that combat would require, the coordinated turns, the overlapping fire patterns, the formation flying that turned 2 dragons from individual weapons into a system. The system was imperfect. The system was forming. "Tomorrow," Daenerys said, landing. "Same time. Same time. Bring Viserion." "Viserion doesn't take instructions." "Neither do Targaryens. We bring him anyway." Jon brought Viserion the next day. The gold dragon joined the formation, badly, the unstable creature veering and drifting and producing the erratic flight pattern that was Viserion's signature. But joining, present. Part of the system that the 2 Targaryens were building. 3 dragons. 2 riders. 1 sky. The building had begun. First lesson. The dragons are not in you. You are in them. The bond is not a chain that holds them to your mind. It's a channel that puts your mind inside theirs. You're not drowning in their fire, you're standing in their minds. And standing in someone else's mind requires the same thing as standing in a storm. Knowing where the ground is. Where's the ground? The ground is who you are. The self. The thing that was you before the dragons, and that will be you after the dragons. The ground is... She looked at the godswood, at the heart tree, at the northern castle that was everything the south was not. The ground is this. Your home. Your name. Your people. The things that the dragons cannot burn, because the things are not combustible. The stark in me. The stark in you. The part that is ice. The dragons are fire. The fire will consume everything that burns. The ice endures. Jon looked at the woman who was teaching him to survive the thing she had given him. The aunt who was his family, and his rival, and his teacher, and the only person in the world who understood the fire. "Thank you," Jon said. "Don't thank me yet. The first lesson is free. The second lesson requires you to admit that Drogon is mine, and will remain mine, and that your claim on Drogon's fire is a claim the Black Dragon will never acknowledge. Drogon is yours. Good. And Rhaegal is mine, as much as a dragon belongs to anyone. And Viserion, the gold dragon, the unstable one, the swing vote. Viserion is both of ours, Jon said. Or neither. Viserion hasn't decided. Then we let Viserion decide. We don't force. We don't compete. We let the dragon choose. And if Viserion chooses me, then Viserion chooses you. And I deal with it. And if Viserion chooses you, then Viserion chooses me. And you deal with it. And if Viserion doesn't choose at all, then Viserion is the freest dragon in the world, and we both deal with that. The godswood held the conversation. The heart tree watched. The 2 Targaryens, the last 2, the aunt and the nephew, the fire and the fire, sat at the roots of a northern tree and began the work of building the thing that neither of them had expected to build. A partnership. Not a marriage, not an alliance. A partnership. 2 people sharing a responsibility that was too large for one person and that required both of them to carry. The partnership was not easy. Nothing between 2 Targaryens was easy. But the beginning was there, in the godswood, under the heart tree, in the northern cold that the dragon fire could not reach. The beginning was enough. The teaching. What Daenerys gave Jon. Daenerys taught Jon to manage the bonds, not to control them. Management and control were different things, and the difference was the thing that every Targaryen dragon lord had learned or died learning. Control implied mastery. Mastery implied dominance. Dominance was the thing that the dragons rejected, because dominance was the human imposition on the dragon's will. And the dragon's will was older and stronger and more persistent than any human imposition. Management implied coexistence, the rider holding the bond without trying to use the bond as a leash, the rider maintaining the self while the dragon maintained the dragon. The two consciousnesses touching but not merging, sharing but not consuming, the partnership that was the true nature of the dragon-rider relationship and that the Targaryen dragon lords had, over 300 years, distorted into the command relationship that had eventually destroyed both the riders and the dragons. "Feel the edges," Daenerys said. On the wall. The two Targaryens, 2 weeks after the conversation in the Godswood, practicing the bond management that was the subject that no Maester had ever studied and no book had ever documented. The edges are the places where your mind meets the dragon's. The edges are where the blurring happens. Jon closed his eyes. He felt the edges, the boundaries between Jon consciousness and Rhaegal consciousness, the place where the grey met the green, the transition zone that was neither man nor dragon, but the blend of both. "Hold the edges," Daenerys said. "Don't push them. Don't pull them. Hold them. The edges are the thing you maintain. When the edges are clear, the bond is healthy. When the edges blur, the bond is consuming. And with 3 bonds? With 3 bonds, the edges are, I don't know. I've never held 3. But the principle should be the same. 3 sets of edges. 3 boundaries. 3 places where you hold yourself against the dragon, and the dragon holds itself against you. Jon held the edges. Rhaegal's edge was warm and steady, the green dragon's mind pressing gently, the pressure that Jon had been interpreting as invasion, and that was, he now understood, greeting. The dragon was not consuming him. The dragon was saying hello, constantly, with the persistence of a creature whose communication was touch rather than words. Viserion's edge was sharper. The gold dragon's mind pressed harder, not hostile but urgent, the consciousness of a creature that wanted something it could not articulate. Jon held the edge and felt the wanting and did not try to answer it because the answering was Daenerys' lesson. Don't answer what you don't understand. Hold the edge. Wait. The understanding comes with time. Drogon's edge was distant. The black dragon's consciousness was at the far edge of Jon's awareness, the connection through blood that was not a bond but an echo, the awareness without the relationship. Drogon did not press. Drogon did not greet. Drogon acknowledged Jon's existence in the blood network, the way a territorial animal acknowledged a distant competitor. I know you're there. Stay there. Drogon will never bond with you, Daenerys said, reading Jon's awareness through her own bond with Drogon. Drogon is mine. The black dragon chose me at hatching and the choice is permanent. I know. I'm not reaching for Drogon. Good. Because reaching for Drogon would be reaching for me. Drogon is the piece of me that flies. If you took Drogon, you'd be taking. I wouldn't. I'm not. Drogon is yours. Daenerys looked at him, the violet eyes. The assessment that was still running, the queen evaluating the nephew, the evaluation ongoing, the trust forming slowly, the way trust formed between Targaryens, which was to say, suspiciously, reluctantly, with the constant awareness that trust between Targaryens had historically been the thing that preceded the knife. You're different from the Targaryens in my experience, Daenerys said. I'm the only Targaryen in your experience, besides yourself. Viserys was a Targaryen, my brother, the one Viserion was named for. And Viserys wanted everything, the throne, the power, the dynasty. Viserys would have taken all 3 dragons without hesitation and used them to burn the world back into the shape he believed it owed him. I'm not Viserys. I know. That's the part that makes this manageable. A man who doesn't want the power is a man who can be taught to manage it. A man who wants the power uses the teaching to increase the control, and increased control is what kills riders and dragons both. So the not wanting is the qualification. The not wanting is the only qualification that matters. Jon held the edges. 3 boundaries, 3 dragon fires, 3 minds pressing on one mind. The holding was exhausting. The holding was also with Daenerys' teaching, with the edge management, with the technique of maintaining the self while touching the dragon. The holding was becoming possible. Not easy. Possible. Possible was the distance between drowning and swimming swimming was the thing that would keep Jon alive. The world's response. What power produced? The political world responded to Jon with the unanimity of a species facing a predator. Every faction wanted him controlled. Cersei sent assassins. Not immediately. The Lannister queen was too smart for immediate action. She waited 2 months, assessed the situation, and then sent 3 men who were not Lannister men, traceable, but independent agents, deniable, who travelled north with the single mandate: kill the dragonrider. The 3-headed dragon was too dangerous to permit, and the man who held all 3 heads was the man who needed to die. The assassins reached Winterfell. They did not reach Jon. Ghost killed the first one. The direwolf, the white shadow, the silent hunter, the creature whose bond with Jon predated the dragon bonds by years. Ghost found the assassin in the corridors of Winterfell at midnight and ended the threat with the efficiency that direwolves brought to everything. 1 bite, 1 kill, no sound. Rhaegal found the second. Not in the castle, outside, approaching from the Wolfswood. The green dragon's awareness of threats to its rider was total. The predator's instinct for protecting its person operating at a range that made assassination impossible from any direction the dragon could sense. The assassin was found in the morning, in the field, with the scorch marks that dragonfire left on everything it touched. The third assassin was caught by Jon himself. Not through combat, through the bonds. The 3 dragon consciousnesses in Jon's mind acted as a surveillance network, the dragon's sensory awareness feeding into Jon's perception, the heat sight and the motion, tracking and the territorial awareness of 3 predators overlapping into a comprehensive picture of every living thing within a mile of Winterfell. Jon felt the assassin approach, felt the hostile intent, not through mind reading, but through the dragon's perception of a creature, the assassin, approaching another creature, Jon, with the body language of aggression. "There's a man in the east corridor with a knife," Jon said to Davos. "Casually. Over breakfast. Send guards. How do you—" "The dragons see him. The dragons see. You can see through the dragons? Not see. Feel. The dragons feel threats. I feel what the dragons feel. The assassin is hostile, and the hostility is visible through the bonds. Davos sent guards. The assassin was captured. The assassin confirmed the Lannister origin. The assassination attempt confirmed the political reality. Jon was a target, and the targeting would continue for as long as Jon held 3 dragon bonds. "You can't be assassinated," Davos said. Not admiringly, worriedly. 3 dragons watching you at all times. A direwolf at your side. The sensory network that the bonds provide. Nobody can reach you. Nobody in the world can get close enough to kill you. That's not reassuring. Why not? Because a man who can't be killed is a man the world fears. And a man the world fears is a man the world unites against. The assassinations will stop. The coalitions will start. And coalitions are harder to fight than assassins. Jon was right. The coalitions formed. Cersei and the remaining southern houses aligned against the dragon threat. Stannis Baratheon declared Jon an abomination, a man who violated the natural order by holding 3 bonds, a man whose existence was a threat to every law and every tradition that the 7 kingdoms were built on. Tyrion assessed the situation with the precision of a man who had been assessing situations his entire life and who had never assessed a situation this large. "One man with 3 dragons," Tyrion said to Varys in the corridor at Winterfell. The 2 advisors, the dwarf and the spider, conducting the conversation that advisors conducted when the situation exceeded the capacity of individual analysis. In the history of the world, this has never happened. Not Aegon the Conqueror. Aegon had 1 dragon and his sisters had the other 2. Not any Targaryen in 300 years of rule. 1 man, 3 dragons. The political implications are terminal, Varys said, for the current order. A man with 3 dragons does not negotiate. He does not compromise. He does not participate in the balance of power that keeps the 7 kingdoms from collapsing into war. A man with 3 dragons is the balance of power. The only question is whether he uses the power wisely. And if he doesn't, we are in the worst possible scenario, an absolute ruler with absolute power and no check on the power except his own character. His character is excellent, for now. Character under absolute power degrades. The Targaryens demonstrated this repeatedly. The Mad King had a fine character before the madness. Maegor the Cruel was not born cruel. You're comparing Jon Snow to the Mad King. I'm comparing the situation. The situation is identical. 1 man with unchecked power. The man is different. The situation is the same. Varys folded his hands. The realm needs a check on the power. If the man cannot check himself, the realm must check him. And how does the realm check a man with 3 dragons? By giving him something he values more than the power. Something he would not sacrifice. Something that serves as the limitation that the power itself cannot provide. What does Jon Snow value? His family, his identity, his northernness, the Stark in him, the wolf. The wolf is the check on the dragon. The wolf has always been the check on the dragon. That's the entire history of the North. The wolf holding the ground while the dragon flies overhead. The question is whether this wolf can hold this ground with 3 dragons pressing on it. Tyrion drank. The assessment was complete. The assessment was terrifying. "We need to help him," Tyrion said. "Not for altruism, for survival. If Jon Snow loses the self under the weight of 3 dragons, the 3 dragons become uncontrolled, and uncontrolled dragons end civilizations." Agreed. Then we help him hold the self. How? By being the people around him who treat him as a man rather than a dragon lord. By maintaining the human relationships that the power threatens to destroy. By being the check. That's a great deal to ask of a dwarf and a eunuch. The world is full of unlikely saviors. We're merely the latest. Even allies were cautious. The northern lords, Jon's lords, the men who had crowned him king in the north, were cautious. A king with 3 dragons was not a king they could influence. A king they could not influence was a king they could not trust. The loyalty that had been freely given was now the loyalty of men who had no other option. And optional less loyalty was compliance, not consent. "Everyone's afraid of me," Jon said. To Robb, at Winterfell. The 2 brothers, the king and the dragonrider, though Jon was also a king, and Robb had abdicated in Jon's favor after the parentage was revealed, which was another complication in a life that was nothing but complications. "I'm not afraid of you," Robb said. "You're the only one." "That's not true. Arya's not afraid. Arya thinks the dragons are magnificent. Arya's 10. Arya's fierce. And Ghost isn't afraid. And Davos isn't afraid. And Daenerys is afraid. Not of the dragons of what I represent. A rival. A replacement. The man who took her children. You didn't take. The effect is the same. However I frame it. However she frames it. The dragons respond to me. The mother's children respond to another rider. The taking is the effect, regardless of the intention. Robb held this. So what do you do? I do the thing that every man does who has been given power he didn't ask for. I carry it. Not because I want to, because dropping it is worse. Dropping it? If I break the bonds, if I could break them, the dragons are wild. 3 wild dragons in the north. 3 uncontrolled predators with the fire to destroy kingdoms. The bonds are not chains on the dragons, they're safety mechanisms. I hold the bonds so the dragons don't destroy the world by accident. That's a burden, not a gift, not power, a burden. The heaviest one I've ever heard of, the heaviest one anyone's ever carried. The brothers sat in the great hall of Winterfell and held the weight. The weight of 3 dragons and a world that feared the man who held them. The weight that was Jon's and that nobody could share because nobody had the blood to share it. The weight was the second cost, the political cost. The isolation that 3 dragons produced, not the isolation of a man without allies, but the isolation of a man whose allies were afraid of him. And the afraidness made the alliance conditional, and the conditionalness made the isolation real. Robb came to Jon the night after the assassins were caught. Not as a king. Robb had abdicated the northern crown when Jon's parentage was revealed, because Robb was Robb, and Robb's honor demanded that the true Targaryen heir take the position that the true Targaryen heir's blood required. The abdication had been painful and graceful, and entirely Robb, the young lord who had been king, giving the crown to the brother who had been bastard with the stark composure that made the giving look easy, and that hid the cost. 3 assassins, Robb said, sitting in Jon's chambers. Ghost between them, the wolf's white body, the bridge between the brothers. The way Ghost had always been the bridge. Cersei's, through intermediaries. And you sensed the third one through the dragons, through the bonds. The dragon's perception feeds into mine. I felt the hostile intent. Robb looked at his brother. His cousin, the man who had been the bastard at the lower table and who was now the most powerful and the most hunted person in the 7 kingdoms. The transformation that had happened over months, but that still, for Robb, felt like it had happened overnight. Can you feel me? Robb said. What? Through the bonds. The dragon perception. Can you feel me? My presence? My warmth? The way you felt the assassin? Jon was quiet. Yes, Jon said. I can feel everyone. The bonds, the dragon's perception. It doesn't distinguish. Hostile intent registers as a specific pattern. But presence, body heat, movement, the fact of a living thing in proximity, I can feel all of it. Everyone in the castle. Every person in Winterfell. That's overwhelming. The word is overwhelming. I can feel 300 people in this castle right now. 300 thermal signatures, each one distinct, each one a presence in the awareness that the dragons feed into my mind. How do you function? I hold the edges. Daenerys taught me, the boundary between the self and the bond, the place where Jon ends and the dragon begins. The edges keep the perception manageable. Without the edges, the perception would... He stopped. Without the edges, I would feel every living thing within a mile, every heartbeat, every breath. The sensory input would overwrite my own senses, and I would stop being Jon and become a sensor, a node, a consciousness that was all input and no identity. That's terrifying. Yes, and you carry this every day, every night. The bonds don't turn off, Robb. They're not a cloak I can remove. They're in my blood, in my nerves, in the part of my brain that processes perception. The dragons are woven into me. and the weaving is permanent. Robb held this. The brother who had grown up beside Jon, who had sparred with Jon, who had been the legitimate son to Jon's bastard, and who had, in the simplest reading, had the better life. The name, the inheritance, the legitimacy, the mother who loved him openly rather than the uncle who loved him in secret. And now the positions were reversed. Jon had the power, the absolute, world-changing, history-defining power of 3 dragon bonds, and Robb had normality, the ordinary human experience of being a man without 3 fires in his skull and gold bleeding into his eyes. "I'd trade with you," Robb said. "I know. Not the dragons, the rest, the sleeping, the dreaming your own dreams, the looking at people without seeing their body heat through walls, the being human part. You can't trade. I know. I'm saying if I could carry some of it, take one of the bonds, lighten the weight, I would. You don't have the blood. I know that too. The Stark blood doesn't carry dragons, only the Targaryen half. The Targaryen half, the half I didn't know I had. The half that has given me 3 dragons and gold eyes and the inability to sleep and the awareness of every living thing in a mile radius." Jon looked at his brother. "I was happier as a bastard. Nobody was happy as a bastard. I was happier as a bastard than I am as a dragon lord. The bastard had 1 bond, ghost, 1 wolf, 1 fire. The dragon lord has 4 bonds and 3 dragons and a political target on his back and the knowledge that every ruler in the world either wants to use him or kill him. Then be a bastard. What? Be a bastard in here, in this room, with me. Be Jon Snow, the boy from the yard, the brother who couldn't hold a shield until he was 13, the bastard who ate at the lower table and who fought with me every morning and who was, before all of this, my brother. I'm still your brother. Then be my brother. Not the dragon lord, not the 3 bonded, not the gold-eyed censor who feels heartbeats through walls. My brother. Jon." Jon looked at Robb, the brother who was offering the one thing that the dragons could not take and that the world could not threaten. The relationship. The brotherhood. The connection between 2 men who had grown up together and who were, despite everything, the blood, the dragons, the crowns, the politics, still brothers. "I'm Jon," Jon said. "Good. Now eat something. You look terrible." Everyone keeps saying that, because it keeps being true. Jon ate, in his chambers, with his brother, with Ghost between them, the dragon fires burning in his mind, the gold eyes watching the food, the 3 bonds humming. But the humming, for 1 hour, in 1 room, with 1 brother, manageable, because the brother was the ground, and the ground held the fire. Jon carried it. He carried it because dropping was worse. Viserion, the choosing. Viserion chose on a morning in late winter. The choosing was not dramatic, not the dramatic moment that the stories would later describe. The dragon descending from the sky, the rider standing with arms spread, the bond sealing with fire and glory. The choosing was small. Jon was in the field outside Winterfell, walking with Ghost. The daily walk, the habit he maintained because the walking was the one thing that was still Jon's, the one activity that the dragons did not share, and that the bonds did not touch. The walking was ice. The walking was north. The walking was the ground. Viserion landed, not near Jon, not the approach that Rhaegal had made, the deliberate closing of distance, the intention visible. Viserion landed 50 yards away, in the open field, and simply sat. the gold dragon sitting in the northern snow, the cream and gold scales catching the winter light. The creature that had been divided for months, sitting still for the first time since Jon had known it. Ghost looked at Viserion. Viserion looked at Ghost. The looking was the beginning, not of hostility, of recognition. The wolf and the dragon looking at each other across 50 yards of northern field, two creatures that were bonded to the same man and that had been, until this moment, in competition. The looking was the ending of the competition, not because one had won, because both had decided that the competing was less important than the man they were competing for. Ghost walked toward Viserion. Jon's heart stopped. The direwolf, his wolf, his first bond, the creature that had been with him since the pups were found near Winterfell. Ghost walked across the field toward the dragon that could kill him in a single breath. "Ghost," Jon said. Ghost ignored him. The wolf walked with the steady, unhurried pace of a creature that had made a decision, the decision visible in every step. "I am going to the dragon. The dragon is part of my person. Therefore, the dragon is part of my territory. I am going to establish the arrangement." Ghost reached Viserion. The wolf sat 3 feet from the dragon. The two creatures, ice and fire, wolf and dragon, north and everywhere else, sitting in the northern field, looking at each other. Viserion lowered its head. The lowering was the choosing, not of Jon, of the arrangement. The dragon choosing to accept the wolf. The dragon choosing to accept the north. The dragon choosing to be part of the thing that Jon was, rather than the thing Viserion had been. Jon felt the bond shift. Viserion's consciousness, the erratic, bright, unstable presence that had been pressing on his mind for weeks, the consciousness settled. Not calm exactly. Viserion would never be calm the way Rhaegal was calm, but settled. The gold dragon finding its place beside the green dragon and the white wolf. The 3 bonds arranging themselves in Jon's mind like instruments finding their chord. 3 bonds, 3 fires, 3 presences. And underneath them, holding them, the thing that Daenerys had taught him to maintain. The self. The Jon. The ice that the fires could not melt. Jon walked across the field. He put his hand on Viserion's neck, the warm scale, the gold cream color, the creature that had been the most uncertain and that was now the most decided. Ghost pressed against Jon's other leg. The wolf and the dragon and the man. The North's triad. The arrangement that nobody had anticipated, and that was now, in a field outside Winterfell, the new reality. Ghost understood. The direwolf did not understand in the way humans understood, through language, through analysis, through the cognitive processing that turned information into knowledge. Ghost understood in the way animals understood, through sense, through instinct, through the deep awareness of a creature that was bonded to a man and that could feel, through the bond, the changes that the man was undergoing. Ghost felt the heat. The wolf's bond with Jon carried the temperature change, the 2-degree elevation, the fire warmth that was not Jon's natural warmth, but the dragon's warmth bleeding through. Ghost felt the warmth and did not understand the warmth, and responded to the warmth with the wolf's solution to things that did not make sense. Proximity. Ghost pressed closer. Ghost stayed closer. Ghost maintained the physical contact that was the wolf's communication. I am here. You are changing. I am not changing. I am the constant. Ghost felt the dreams. At night, when Jon's sleeping mind hosted the wolf dreams and the dragon dreams simultaneously, Ghost felt the competition, the green fire and the gold fire, pressing into the space that had been the wolf's alone for years. Ghost did not fight the fires. Ghost endured them. The wolf's consciousness pressed against Jon's sleeping mind with the steady, cold, patient pressure of ice, the northern thing that did not compete with fire, but that occupied the space beside fire, and that said, I was here first. I will be here last. Ghost felt the identity blur, the half-heartbeat of waking confusion. Am I Jon? Am I Rhaegal? Am I Viserion? Ghost felt the blur and responded with the only tool the wolf possessed. The nuzzle. The cold nose pressed against Jon's hand. The sensation, cold, wet, real, wolf, cutting through the blur and providing the answer. You are Jon. You are the man. The wolf knows. The wolf was the anchor, not metaphorically, literally. In the cognitive storm of 3 dragon bonds, Ghost's bond was the fixed point, the ice at the center of the fire, the single connection that predated the dragons, and that provided the reference that the dragons could not overwrite. Without Ghost, Jon would have dissolved. The 3 dragon fires without the wolf ice would have consumed the man the way fire consumed kindling, not because the dragons were hostile, but because the dragons were too much. The 3 minds too large for one human mind, and the largeness would have expanded until the human mind was lost inside the dragon minds. Ghost prevented the losing. Ghost prevented it by being cold, by being steady, by being the wolf that had been at Jon's side since a litter of pups was found near Winterfell, and a white runt was given to the bastard, and the bastard had held the runt, and the runt had held the bastard, and the holding had been the first bond, and the first bond was the strongest, because the first bond was the foundation. The wolf and the dragons, the ice and the fire, the anchor and the storm. Jon understood this, not through analysis, but through the bond, through Ghost's consciousness pressing against his with the message that Ghost had been sending for years, and that was now, in the presence of 3 dragons, the most important message in the world. I am here. I am not leaving. I am the ground. Ghost was the ground. Ghost was the thing that kept Jon standing when the fire tried to lift him off the earth. Ghost was the Stark in him made flesh. Jon carried 3 dragons, not as weapons, not as symbols, not as the instruments of conquest that the Targaryen dragon lords had used them as responsibilities. 3 living, breathing, ancient, dangerous responsibilities that would be with him for the rest of his life. 3 fires in his mind, 3 presences in his consciousness, 3 weights on his shoulders that he could not set down, and that nobody could share, and that were, for all their cost, the thing he was for, the burden, not the power, the burden. The acceptance, what Jon became. Jon accepted the burden on a morning that was not remarkable, not in the great hall, not at a ceremony, not with lords standing and titles being declared, and the political machinery producing the result that political machinery produced. In the Godswood, at the Heart Tree, alone, except for Ghost and the 3 fires in his mind and the old gods watching with their permanent eyes. He sat at the roots of the weirwood and felt the 3 bonds and felt the cost, the exhaustion, the identity erosion, the gold in his eyes, the dreams that were not his, the waking moments of confusion when the self blurred. He felt all of it, and he accepted it, not with joy, not with resignation, with the stark acceptance, the northern quality that was not enthusiasm or surrender, but the honest recognition that the thing was real, and the real was not going away, and the not going away was the condition of the life he had been given. The Godswood was the coldest place in Winterfell, and the cold was the thing Jon needed. Not the dragon cold, not the fire warmth that had replaced his natural temperature, not the 2-degree elevation that was the physical evidence of the bonds. The Godswood's cold was the old cold, the ice cold, the cold of the weirwood and the earth and the 8,000 years of northern winter that lived in the roots of the Heart Tree. The Godswood's cold pressed against the dragon heat the way Ghost pressed against Jon's leg, steadily, constantly, the natural force opposing the unnatural force, the ice holding the line against the fire. Jon sat at the heart tree and felt the opposition. The heat inside, the cold outside. The two forces that were his blood, the Targaryen fire and the Stark ice, manifested in the temperature of his body and the temperature of the air, the physical expression of the identity that he was learning to hold. He had been coming to the Godswood every morning since the battle. The morning ritual, the sitting, the cold, the contact with the ground that Daenerys had taught him was the self's anchor. The ritual was the thing that kept Jon from dissolving, not the teaching, not the technique, not the edge management that Daenerys' instruction provided. The ritual, the daily practice of being Jon. Ghost was with him, always. The wolf did not leave Jon's side anymore. The protective instinct intensified by the dragon bonds. The wolf's awareness that the man was under pressure, and that the pressure required the wolf's constant presence. Ghost lay at Jon's feet in the Godswood, the white fur against the dark earth, the red eyes watching the weirwood face with the flat attention of an animal guarding its person. Rhaegal was overhead, circling Winterfell in the morning light, the green dragon visible against the grey sky, the bond humming in Jon's mind with the warm presence that had become as familiar as Ghost's cold presence. Rhaegal above, Ghost below, Jon between. Viserion was in the Wolfswood. The gold dragon settled now. The instability reduced since the choosing, the creature finding its place in the arrangement that the three bonds created. Viserion was not circling. That was Rhaegal's habit. Viserion was hunting. That was Viserion's preference. The gold dragon ranging through the northern forest, the predator's instinct satisfied by the hunting that the forest's deer population reluctantly provided. 3 dragons, 1 wolf, 1 man. Jon closed his eyes. He felt the arrangement, the 3 fires and the ice, the 4 presences in his mind, the constellation of consciousness that was his daily reality, and that would be his daily reality for the rest of his life. The arrangement was not comfortable. The arrangement would never be comfortable. But the arrangement was manageable. The edges were held. The self was maintained. The Jonness persisted beneath the dragonness, the ice holding the fire. He opened his eyes. The gold-grey eyes. The eyes that were the visible proof of the bonds. The eyes that would never be fully grey again, because the fire had changed them, and the changing was permanent. "I am Jon Snow," he said, "to the tree, to the gods, to the 3 fires and the wolf and the morning cold. I am Jon Stark. I am Aegon Targaryen. I am the man who holds 3 dragons, and who does not want 3 dragons, and who carries them because the alternative is worse." The tree listened. "I will not conquer with them. I will not burn with them. I will not use them as the Targaryens used them, as instruments of power, as weapons of dynasty, as the fire that forced the world to kneel." The 3 fires stirred in his mind. Rhaegal's warm agreement, Viserion's bright acknowledgement, Drogon's distant, hostile awareness. "I will hold them. That's all. Hold them and manage them and keep them from destroying the things I love. The North, the family, the people who are mine, not because I conquered them, but because they chose me." He looked at the weirwood face. "This is who I am. Not the Dragon Lord, not the king, not the conqueror or the prince or the heir to any throne. The man who holds, the man who carries, the man who stands between the fire and the world and keeps both from consuming the other." Ghost pressed against his leg. The wolf and the dragon, the ice and the fire. Both. Always both. He stood. He left the Godswood. He went to the great hall where the morning's work was waiting, the governance, the councils, the daily management of a kingdom that was held together by a man who was held together by will. He worked. The three fires burned in his mind. The gold eyes watched the northern morning. The wolf walked beside him. The dragons circled overhead, Rhaegal and Viserion above Winterfell, the green and the gold against the grey sky, the two dragons that were Jon's. And in the distance, to the south, Drogon's awareness, Daenerys' fire, the black dragon that was not Jon's and that would never be Jon's, and that was, in its not being Jon's, the proof that the world was not entirely consumed. Some things remained unshared. Some bonds remained singular. Some fires belonged to the person who had lit them and to nobody else. Jon governed. He governed with 3 dragons and a wolf and the weight of a burden that no man in 3,000 years had carried. He governed not because the governing was easy, or because the power was pleasant, or because the weight was bearable. He governed because the world was safer with a man who feared the power than a man who desired it. He governed because the burden was the purpose. He governed because carrying was the thing he was for. What if Jon Snow bonded with all 3 dragons? He did not seek it. He did not want it. The dragons came to him through blood, through the Targaryen inheritance that he had not asked for, through the fire that recognized the fire across the distance between a northern bastard and the last 3 dragons in the world. Rhaegal chose him first. The green dragon, named for his father, drawn to the blood that was Rhaegar's legacy. The bond was warm and steady, and it cost Jon his sleep and his grey eyes and the first layer of his humanity. Viserion chose him second. The gold dragon, the unstable one, the creature that had been divided between 2 Targaryens and that finally settled when a wolf walked across a field and sat beside a dragon, and the 2 creatures agreed that the man was worth sharing. Drogon did not choose him. Drogon remained Daenerys's, the black dragon, the fiercest, the queen's fire. Drogon acknowledged Jon's existence in the blood network, the way a territorial predator acknowledged a neighbor. Present, aware, unclaimed. 3 fires. 1 man. The weight of 3 ancient minds pressing on 1 human consciousness. The cost measured in exhaustion and identity erosion and the gold that bled into grey eyes and the dreams that were not his and the waking moments when the self blurred. The world feared him. Every faction, every ruler, every power feared the man with 3 dragons. The fear produced assassination attempts and political coalitions and the isolation that absolute power always produced. A man surrounded by compliance where loyalty had been. Daenerys taught him to survive it. The aunt who was his family and his rival and the only person who understood the fire. She taught him to hold the edges, the boundaries between self and dragon, the places where the man ended and the fire began. She taught him that the bond was not a chain, but a channel, and the channel required the rider to know the ground. The ground was the north. The ground was the Stark in him, the ice that the fire could not melt. Jon accepted the burden, not with joy, with the Stark acceptance, the northern recognition that the real was not going away. He accepted the 3 fires, and the weight, and the gold eyes, and the dreams, and the cost, because the alternative was 3 wild dragons burning the world, and the alternative was worse. He did not conquer. He did not burn. He did not use the dragons as the Targaryens had used them, instruments of dynasty, weapons of domination. He held them. That was all. He held 3 dragons and kept them from destroying the things he loved. The wolf and the dragon. The ice and the fire. The man who carried the heaviest burden in the history of the world, because carrying was the thing he was for. Not the power, the purpose. The last morning. What Jon held. On a morning in late winter, Jon sat in the godswood of Winterfell, and held the three fires and the ice and the self and the purpose, and the holding was not easy. Never easy. But the holding was his. The morning was quiet. Winterfell was waking. The sounds of the castle beginning its day. The servants and the guards and the horses and the dogs. The 300 thermal signatures that Jon's dragon-enhanced perception detected without trying. The detection was background now, the constant hum of the bonds that Jon had learned to treat as a noise floor rather than a signal, present but not consuming. Ghost was at his feet, the white wolf, the red eyes, the bond that was older than the dragon bonds, and that was, Jon had come to understand, the thing that kept the dragon bonds from consuming him. The wolf ice holding the dragon fire, the first bond anchoring the later ones, the anchor that made the weight bearable. Rhaegal was circling above Winterfell, the green dragon, the first to choose, the bond that was warmest and steadiest, the connection that had started in a field on a starlit night and that had grown into the deepest partnership Jon had ever known with a non-human creature. Rhaegal's consciousness hummed in Jon's mind with the steady warmth of a fire in a hearth, present, constant, the heat that sustained rather than consumed. Viserion was in the wolf's wood, hunting, the gold dragon whose choosing had been the quietest and the most profound, the wolf walking across a field to sit beside a dragon, the two creatures agreeing that the man was worth sharing. Viserion's consciousness buzzed in Jon's mind with the bright energy that was Viserion's signature, the gold fire, the fastest, the most alive. Drogon was south. With Daenerys. The black dragon's consciousness was a distant echo in Jon's blood awareness, not a bond but an awareness, the knowledge that the third dragon existed and was alive, and was with the woman who was Jon's aunt and who was, despite everything, his family. 4 fires, 1 ice, 1 man. Jon opened his eyes. The gold-grey eyes. The eyes that would never be fully grey again, and that he had stopped wanting to be fully grey, because the gold was part of him now. The dragon's mark on the man, the visible evidence of the bonds that were his and that he was. He stood. He left the godswood. He walked to the great hall where the morning's work was waiting. The councils, the ravens, the grain reports and the trade agreements and the diplomatic correspondence and the 1,000 small tasks that governance required. The boring, essential, unglamorous work that the dragonrider chose over the conquering and the burning and the soaring. The work was the statement. The work said, I am not a god. I am not a conqueror. I am a man who governs. The dragons are mine, and I am theirs, and the arrangement is permanent, and the permanence is the burden, and the burden is the purpose. Ghost walked beside him, the wolf who had been first, the wolf who would be last, the ice that held the fire. The dragons were overhead, the green and the gold, circling Winterfell in the winter light, the shapes against the northern sky that every northerner had learned to see, and that every northerner was learning not to fear. Jon walked into the great hall. He sat at the table. He worked. The 3 fires burned. The ice held. The man governed. Not because the governing was easy, because the governing was the purpose, because the burden was the point, because carrying 3 dragons and a wolf and a kingdom and a name and a secret and the weight of a world that feared him was the thing Jon Snow was made for, not by choice and not by desire, but by the blood that was fire and the heart that was ice and the will that was northern and the stubbornness that was stark and the carrying that was the only thing the world needed from the man who held 3 fires in one mind and who would hold them every day for the rest of his life. Not the power, the purpose,